Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution, and I do have a World War III alert. We got a World War III alert, but before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, the invaders are being crushed as CNN lies about what's going on. Good morning, Queen Grand Rising. Let's get right into this World War III update. Russia crushes NATO and Ukraine, but they're lying on the fake news. But let's get to the truth.
On January 5th, at 9 a.m. Moscow time, the Ukrainian army launched a new attempt to penetrate the defenses of Russian troops in Kursk direction of the front. Military journalist and analyst Yuri Podolyaka was among the first to report about the beginning of a new attack by Ukrainian forces. In particular, he stated that the Ukrainian High Military Command had launched an attack with significant forces north of the city of Sudza. According to him, on the morning of January 5th, the main fighting unfolded north of the 38004 highway, connecting cities such as Sudza and Kursk. At the same time, he said that the main goal of the Ukrainian army was the invasion of Berden. Yuri Podolyaka also noted the heavy losses of the Ukrainian army in manpower and equipment. According to him, everything that is happening indicates that the Russian General Staff knew in advance about the upcoming offensive of the Ukrainian army. And that is why the Ukrainian troops failed to enter Berden. An authoritative military expert, Boris Rozin, also commented on the situation in the Kursk region. In particular, he confirmed that on January 5th, the Ukrainian army made a new attempt to launch the so-called meat assault on Russian positions, throwing significant forces into battle. It is also worth noting the words of war correspondent Roman Alekin. According to him, the attempts of the Ukrainian army to break through towards the settlements of Berden and Bolshoy Soldotskoy turned into a real disaster for the Ukrainian troops. Roman Alekin noted that in the first hours of the Ukrainian attack, Russian artillery, FPV drones, and combat aviation destroyed more than 30 units of enemy heavy equipment, including Western tanks. Against this backdrop, at 11 a.m. Moscow time, the Russian military reported that the attack of the Ukrainian army had been completely repulsed. At the same time, they also confirmed the heavy losses of the Ukrainian army in manpower and equipment. However, as it turned out, this was only the beginning of the Ukrainian offensive. At 2 p.m. Moscow time, the Ukrainian army launched a second attack, throwing tanks and dozens of infantry fighting vehicles into battle. Simultaneously with this, Ukrainian propaganda began spreading disinformation that Ukrainian troops had allegedly captured the settlement of Berden. However, the commander of one of the Spetsnaz Akhmet groups, a lieutenant colonel with the call sign Hades, urged not to believe the Ukrainian side. According to him, the Ukrainian troops did not even manage to approach the outskirts of this settlement. He also noted that the second attack by the Ukrainian troops turned out to be as disastrous as the previous one. It is reported that within 2 hours, the Ukrainian army lost 3 military columns and 300 soldiers. Immediately after that, the Ukrainian army launched a third attack on the positions of Russian troops to break through towards the settlement of Berden. However, the Russian military noted that the third attack by the Ukrainian troops was not so powerful, and rather resembled the death throes of a dying fish. All this indicates that the Ukrainian army almost completely exhausted its offensive potential in the first two attacks, as a result of which the Russian troops managed to stop the offensive of the Ukrainian forces completely. Later, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially announced that all three attacks by the Ukrainian army in the direction of the settlements of Berden, Novosotnetski, and Bolshu-Soldotskoy were successfully repelled by Russian troops. Moreover, the Russian Defense Ministry noted that the Ukrainian army's attacks on Russian positions in the Kursk region were not offensive, but only conventional counterattacks. Russian military department said that the Ukrainian army had taken such a desperate step in order to disrupt a major offensive by the Russian troops in the Kursk region. It is reported that participating in this attack, Ukrainian army units from the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade, the 82nd Separate Assault Brigade, and the 36th Separate Marine Brigade suffered catastrophic losses in manpower and equipment, and were unable to achieve none of the set tasks. My dear truth seekers, given the fact that during today's attack, the Ukrainian army managed to take control only of the settlement of Cherkaskoy Portnoy, which had been in the gray zone for 5 months, it is safe to say that today's attempt by Ukrainian troops to attack Russian positions resulted in an epic fail. Against this backdrop, insiders in Kiev said that the head of the Kiev regime, Volodymyr Zelensky, remaining dissatisfied with the results of today's attack by the Ukrainian army, announced a meeting of the Ukrainian General Staff, where the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Alexander Syrsky, will have to report on the current situation in the Kursk region. It is reported that this meeting will be held on Monday, January 6. According to the authoritative Telegram channel Legitimate, Volodymyr Zelensky is very angry at the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Alexander Syrsky, as he promised the head of the Kiev regime to normalize the situation in the Kursk region, where the Ukrainian army has lost 70% of the controlled territory over the past 60 days. It is reported that General Syrsky personally promised Zelensky to fix the situation in the Kursk region before Donald Trump's inauguration. However, today's failure of the Ukrainian army made Zelensky nervous, as Kiev failed to increase the zone of controlled territory in anticipation of upcoming negotiations with the Trump administration.
Trump can't save him.
At the moment, Zelensky is demanding from the Ukrainian General Staff as many successful operations and territorial gains as possible in the Kursk region. In his opinion, all this should give Kiev a strong position in the upcoming negotiations. Proceeding from all this, it can be stated with confidence that by January 20th, the Kiev regime will commit many more similar meat assaults, without sparing its soldiers and heavy equipment. Meanwhile, while Zelensky continues to sacrifice thousands of Ukrainian soldiers in the Kursk region, in order to achieve a political and informational effect, the Russian army has liberated another settlement in the Pokrovsk direction of the front. In particular, on January 5, war correspondents confirmed that the settlement of Sukhoy Yar, southeast of Pokrovsk, came under the full control of the Russian army. Moreover, after the liberation of Sukhoy Yar by Russian troops, the Ukrainian army units located in the settlement of Lasovka found themselves in an operational encirclement. Against this backdrop, the Ukrainian troops started to leave that settlement hastily. Well, as you can see, the victorious offensive of the Russian army continues in all key directions of the front. Seeing all this, it is safe to say that even the military adventure of the Kiev regime and the Kursk region will not save Zelensky and his Western masters from the humiliating fate of the loser.
If we go to a likelihood of sustained peace between the United States and Russia on the horizon?
I mean, there's a possibility. Donald Trump has articulated several times during the campaign for presidency, which he won, his desire to break free of the policy trap of the past several decades. He has called out the United States as the greatest threat to the United States because of the aggressive stance we have taken around the world, our self-appointed role as world policeman, and the fact that this role ends up getting us tied down in endless wars that achieve nothing and cost us everything. And he has singled out the situation in Ukraine as one such conflict. He's rightfully called out the 80-year-old NATO alliance as being problematic, definitely a resource drain for the United States, but also an organization that has set a policy trap in Europe that the more we invest in NATO, the more likely it is there's going to be a conflict with Russia, because NATO has, since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, used Russia as, and the threat of a renewed Russian aggression as the reason, the justification for the continuation of NATO. So, Trump has been primed to move us in a different direction. He has to overcome several hurdles. First and foremost, which is the fact that the United States has as an establishment, deep state, whatever we want to call it, that is programmed for conflict with Russia. I mean, the military-industrial complex alone needs the threat of conflict or the potential of conflict to justify the hundreds of billions of dollars that it demands from the American taxpayer to build weapons to, so that we could fight in such a war. The moment you start talking about peace with Russia, you talk about taking away, a lot of money from a lot of people, and money is power, and that is a problem for Trump. How does he overcome that? You might want to overcome that, using your intellect. But the problem is that the American academic establishment has, for the past several decades, not been teaching people about the reality of Russia, but rather the theory of how to dominate and exploit Russia. This is why we get ambassadors like Michael McFaul instead of ambassadors like Jack Matlock, one of the last ambassadors of the Soviet Union. This is why we get advisors who whisper in Trump's ear about Russia, who know nothing about Russia. So, he's got to come over the domestic hurdle. And then the other one is, how do you convince Russia to cease a conflict that Russia's winning when your demands for cessation of conflict could only be imposed on Russia if Russia was losing? Trump has to overcome his own ego on this one and accept the fact that Russia not only has won, but won big. And as the big winner, Trump understands the big winners get the big payout. And the United States is going to have to be willing to give Russia the payout that it's demanding in Ukraine.
The neocons in the State Department and elsewhere, the deep state throughout the government, has this ingrained generations-long animosity towards Russia and the Russian people. School children, as well as academics at high-end universities, are involved in this same cultural hatred of Russians. You have been to Russia many times. You've studied the Russian government. You've interacted with Russian officials and with Russian people. Do they have the same hatred for us as is preached here for them?
There's no hatred for Russia, for the United States and Russia. There's concern about the American government, about American policy, but the attitude of the Russian people toward the American people is actually one of human desire for peaceful cohabitation. I used to would say that they want to be friends, and they do want to be friends, but I think the Russians at this stage are so perturbed by the United States that they're not going to extend their hand first. If the United States wants to come to Russia and extend the hand of friendship, the Russians will be more than happy to take it. But Russia's more than happy to keep the United States at arm's length right now, because we haven't shown ourselves to be trustworthy as friends, as people capable of friendship. I just want to say one thing when you speak of the animosity that America has towards Russia. I disagree with that contention, because in order to have animosity, you actually have to know that which you have a dislike of. Uh, Americans know nothing about Russia, nothing, absolutely nothing. So how do you have animosity to something you don't understand? And that's the problem. Russophobia is, the irrational fear of Russia, but it's a fear based upon ignorance. One of the most dangerous things to the United States, to the establishment, is when people like myself go to Russia, learn about Russia, capture the true essence of Russia, then bring that reality back to the United States and seek to inform our fellow Americans about, the fact that Russia does not constitute a threat. The Russian people are not our enemies. The United States is fearful of it. This is why they took my passport away and they won't let me travel to Russia anymore. Because they don't like what I was doing.
Why do people like Victoria Nuland and her colleagues in the State Department engineer the coup in 2014 and believe that they can actually use American weaponry in Ukraine as a battering ram with which to drive Vladimir Putin from office?
Well, why did the CIA think that they could arm and equip Ukrainian nationalists back in 1948 and 49 and fly them and parachute them into Ukraine to continue an insurrection that killed hundreds of thousands of people? Because the CIA, the American government, don't care about Russia, don't like the Russians, don't want to have anything to do with the Russians. They want to destroy Russia. It's been our goal and objective since 1948. When the CIA began using Ukraine as a battering ram through violence to bring down the Soviet Union. The CIA funded Ukrainian nationalists from 1946, 47 up until 1990 for the purpose of subverting Russia, to bring Russia down. When the Soviet Union went away, we went away from saying, oh, we're going to destroy Russia, to saying we have destroyed Russia. Now we need to keep Russia down. And we spent a decade with our foot on their throat. One day, a definitive book that will be accessible to Americans will be written about the decade of the 90s in the former Soviet Union, in Russia, and the horror of that. It makes what happened in the American Depression pale by comparison. Millions of people died. There was rampant crime, and we were responsible. There's a memorandum that just released by the National Security Archives based upon a Freedom of Information Act written by a diplomat named Mary. And it's stunning to read about the arrogance of the United States. And he calls us out. He says, what you're doing in promoting Yeltsin is destroying democracy. You're destroying any chance of democracy by supporting this autocratic dictator, and you're failing to focus on the things that have to happen for Russia to recover from the calamity of perestroika and the collapse of the Soviet Union. But the United States had no interest in doing anything that benefited the Russian people. We simply wanted to control Russia so that we could oversee the destruction of Russia, and we've been doing that ever since. So why does it surprise anybody? This didn't happen in a vacuum. 2014. We've been trying to get Ukrainian nationalists in power in Ukraine since Ukraine became independent. 2004, 2005, the color revolution, the orange revolution, brought Ukrainian nationalists into power. That was a CIA-backed, CIA-funded operation. But unfortunately for the CIA, the Russian population of Ukraine re-elected Viktor Yanukovych. He won the 2004-2005 election, but we orchestrated, basically a soft coup to nullify that election illegally, put the people in. He won again in 2010, and now in 2014, they had to get rid of him and destroy the Russian-speaking population. That's what happened. It's what Victoria Nuland was just the face of what has been a continuous policy objective, to destroy Russia by using Ukraine, by using the forces of Ukrainian nationalism to be that battering ram you speak of.
General Keith Kellogg, who President-elect Trump has indicated he will utilize as an envoy to Russia and to Ukraine, has basically is reported to have said that if Vladimir Putin doesn't negotiate in good faith with Donald Trump, the United States will increase the military supplies that it provides to Ukraine. Isn't this insane, if true?
If true, it is insane. I have no reason to doubt it because that's been the consistent theme of the Trump administration when it comes to Russia, or the Trump team when it comes to Russia. Peace through strength is their mantra. But strength, I mean, it's basically the mantra of a bully. It means I'm going to come into the playground, and there will be peace in the playground as long as you do what I tell you to do. And that would be the equivalent of the bully coming into the playground while there's a game going on, and one of the teams is really studly team that's winning, and the bully says that game's over, call it a draw. Then the studly teams are going to look at the bully and say, you know, you're sort of fat, you're out of shape, you haven't done this in a while. Everybody on our team can kick your butt. Do you really want to do this? Because we're going to keep playing the game, we're going to win the game, then we're going to turn around and we're going to beat you at whatever game you're playing. And that's the Russian attitude right now. They really don't care about Keith Kellogg, about Donald Trump, about anybody. Why? Because we have had a policy, we being the United States, have had a policy since 1948 to destroy them. We openly articulated it in 2022 when Lloyd Austin flew out of Ukraine, landed in Poland, and said the strategic goal of the United States is the strategic defeat of Russia. That means political collapse, economic collapse, societal collapse. That's what we want to do to Russia. Do you think Russia really has any time for lunacy such as that? They have prepared a military that's capable of defending Russia. And if we want to fight them, they will fight us. And wherever we want to take it, they will beat us, up to and including destroying the world with nuclear weapons. So it's time that Donald Trump, if he really wants peace, fires his entire team and takes over the helm himself and goes meet with the Russians and follows through on that which he says he wants. Peace.
His national security team, and of course none is in office yet because he's not in office yet, are not only neocons, they're ardent Zionists. Is there a connection?
Yes, unfortunately, there is a connection. The philosophy of Zionism, if you think about it, is about a superior power, superior people, basically imposing their will on inferior people. That's what Zionism's about. The United States is a Zionist power from that perspective. We seek to impose our will on people that we deem to be lesser. I mean, look, I love America. I would say I love my country as much or more than most people. But the love of my country comes from a love of the Constitution and the potential of my country. I believe that we have the potential to be a great nation and be a great people. But that doesn't mean that we're superior to anybody. It doesn't mean that we have a right to go around and impose our will on anybody. That doesn't make us a great nation. What makes us a great nation is living up to the ideals and values that we set for ourselves. If we can do that at home, then we become a great nation because we're great to ourselves. But the idea that we can go out and conquer people, bully people, impose people doesn't make us great. It makes us lesser. It makes us, less than the people we're seeking to impose, because the people we're trying to impose our will on just want to live in peace in their own home. They're not trying to come here and impose their will. We're not acting in self-defense. We are in search of enemies, and that doesn't make us great. That makes us weak, morally weak, intellectually weak, and we're not strong enough physically to get away with that anymore.
Secretary of State Blinken has been giving a series of farewell interviews, one of which was to the New York Times. Some of this will probably make your blood boil, Scott. But here he is repeating his mantra that Putin has failed. Not making it up. You'll hear it out of his mouth in just a moment. Chris, cut number 2.
Do you feel like you've left Ukraine in the strongest position that you could have? Or what are the things that you could have done differently?
Well, first, what we've left is Ukraine, which was not self-evident because Putin's ambition was to erase it from the map. We stopped that. Putin has failed. His strategic objective in regaining Ukraine has failed and will not succeed. Ukraine is standing. And I believe it also has extraordinary potential, not only to survive, but actually to thrive going forward. And that does depend on decisions that future administrations and many other countries will make.
It's hard for anybody to take that seriously, Scott.
Let's start off with some statements of fact. Russia never had any territorial ambition in Ukraine whatsoever. Even on the very sensitive issue of Crimea, Russia always operated on the fact that with the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the agreement to the 1991 borders, Crimea was Ukraine. There was certain sovereignty about Sevastopol, and based upon treaties and such that Russia wanted Ukraine to continue. But Russia never said, we're taking Crimea. And when this conflict started, remember when in 2014, when the Donbass Russians said, we're done with these Ukrainian nationalists and they sought independence, Russia said, no, you're part of Ukraine. The Minsk Accords was about retaining them as part of Ukraine. Russia is the only nation that was trying to implement the Minsk Accords. And even when this conflict started, and Russia was compelled by law and by humanity to recognize the independence of people who wanted to be independent from Ukraine in the Donbass, the territory that they took in support of this military campaign was territory that Russia was willing to and ready to cede back to Ukraine. Russia wasn't fighting a war of territorial acquisition. So Tony Blinken is a liar, a stinking liar, the worst kind of liar, because he's a Secretary of State and he knows better. It's not as though he's some cat we pulled off the street who's sitting there talking because they don't know any better. He's the man who made policy. He knows what the truth is. He is a liar, straight up. And to say that Ukraine has survived, my God, Tony Blinken, 1 million dead Ukrainians isn't surviving. He's a war criminal of the highest sort. I really look forward to the day that the United States Congress calls him in to investigate him for high crimes and misdemeanors, for lying to the American people, and for behaving unconstitutionally. Because I believe that much of the U.S. policy towards Ukraine, especially since September of last year, has been done unilaterally by Blinken in total obviation of constitutional norms. The president is not mentally capable of governing. Others are governing in his stead without the American people knowing. And Blinken initiated policies in November that bypassed the Department of Defense, who normally would provide a check and balance. These are policies related to the approval of the use of ATACMS missiles and other aggressive acts against Russia that brought the United States very close to the brink of war. The Secretary of State is not authorized by the Constitution to declare war, to take the United States to war, and yet that is what Tony Blinken is doing. So he's not just a liar, he's a warmonger and a criminal.
Alistair Crook has written a fascinating piece out yesterday speculating that if Donald Trump and his team are unable to achieve the type of negotiation that General Kellogg has asked for, that he might actually, in order to manifest a certain American hegemony and personal virility, attack Iran. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, big mistake.
I do think that Trump can separate Iran from Russia. I do believe that, again, we come back to the peace through strength mantra that is the foundation of Trump's approach. I think he wants to enter into any potential negotiations with Iran about the future of their nuclear program, with the Iranians understanding what the consequences, potential conflict consequences of failing to take these talks to fruition. Trump has said there could be no nuclear program, no nuclear weapons program in Iran. Iran is literally a nuclear weapons state today. They're one political decision and 4 or 5 days away from having a nuclear bomb. This is something that's unacceptable to Donald Trump. And normally, if this was the government of Iran that existed before the fall of Bashar al-Assad, the government of Iran that existed when President Raisi was in power, we would be headed towards a military conflict with Iran. But there's a new president in town. He's a moderate president. He ran on a platform when he ran for presidency back in June of last year of saying, I want to reach out to the West and repair relations with the West. And he has not been a fan of bringing this conflict to Israel. He's not looking for a war. He's told this to the Turkish foreign minister and has said he's ready to negotiate. So I think this is Trump posturing. But I do think that Trump, when Trump withdrew from the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal back in 2018, he didn't do it as part of a policy of regime change. He did it saying, I want a better deal. This is a bad deal. I want a better deal. Now he has the chance. He has an Iranian leader and a set of circumstances in which he can begin negotiations for a better deal. Whether or not Trump has a team capable of pulling these negotiations off, I don't know. But there is the potential for this. Should these negotiations fail, however, I do think that the United States and Israel will be looking at military strikes against Iran, and that would be devastating because we don't have the capacity to deliver a knockout blow, and Iran's retaliation would destroy Middle East oil production, gas production, and the global economy at a time when that's the last thing Donald Trump needs. When you're a new president seeking to make America great again, the last thing you need is a global energy crisis that destroys your economy.
Do you think it's realistic that the new Al Jilani, the one who trimmed his beard and wears what appears to be Brooks Brothers suits, will actually have an alliance with Bibi Netanyahu?
I don't know about an alliance. I don't think there'll be an actual recognition of that, but there's a de facto understanding amongst the Al-Qaeda people that represents the guidance given to them by their masters, the United States, Turkey, Israel, and others, that this new government in Syria will not be seen by Israel as a threat and will not be threatening to Israel. And I think that Jolani is happy to trade, to concede that in exchange for getting what the Islamists have always wanted, a caliphate. And that's what he has. For 4 years now, he's going to govern without any effort for an election. And at the end of 4 years, he will not turn this power over. He has turned over every senior ministry, the defense ministry, intelligence ministry, et cetera, to head choppers, to guys who execute women, to people who set people on fire, slit throats. This is who they are. This is the real face of Jolani and his government. You can put them in a suit all you want. At the end of the day, they cut off heads, and they're still cutting off heads. What's going on in Syria today is an absolute calamity, tragedy, etc. The prosecution and persecution of Alawites, of Christians, of Druze, and of anybody who at any time said, I worked for Bashar al-Assad or I supported the Assad government. These are all dead people walking.
All of this orchestrated, perpetrated, financed by Tony Blinken's Department of State.
100%. Hey, I just have a curious question for Tony Blinken. You had a $10 million bounty on this guy's head, and now you took it off. What made you do that? What part of him being Al-Qaeda suddenly went away? And he can't answer that question, which means that the $10 million bounty was always a lie. It was always an act of theater, that the United States never intended to fully hold these people to account, that Al-Qaeda has always been an extension of American foreign and national security policy when it comes to implementing American policy objectives in the Middle East.
Scott, a pleasure, my dear friend, no matter what we talk about. I wish all of us were so-called suicide and explosion of a vehicle outside of the Trump International Hotel and Tower in Las Vegas, Nevada. What are the anomalies there? And what kind of nonsense does the FBI want us to believe?
Well, I wouldn't even characterize. I did use the word anomaly in one of my pieces, but the reality is the FBI is lying, bald-faced lying about how this individual died. They claim, and they said, oh, it's backed up by a coroner, that the individual shot himself with a Desert Eagle. Desert Eagle shoots a 50 caliber bullet. It's a big bullet. That bullet is about the size of my middle finger, and it's literally about that long. Okay. It has enormous force. Anybody that's ever shot one of those handguns, it has an enormous recoil. So if you're trying to shoot, and they claim that this guy shot himself in the left side of the head, which means the gun should have fallen to the side, but they said they found it on the front seat, in the front floor. Well, that doesn't make sense, number one. But number two, we have the actual video. in the video, when you go frame by frame, you can see the moment that the explosion starts. And we're told that he died before the car exploded. But you can see very clearly in the video, the individual in the driver's seat, and I refer to the individual because I'm not certain it was Tim, this Matthew Leibelsberger, who they claim it was. You see this individual sitting upright, head is upright. You would see the gun in the left hand. You don't see the gun in the left hand. You would see the explosion. A big fireball comes out the end of that gun when it's fired. You don't see a fireball. You don't see a flash of light. What you see is the individual sitting there, and then this explosion starts from down below. Now, some people said, well, he could have exploded the car by shooting the firearm into the battery, except that's not the FBI story. The FBI story is he shot and killed himself, then the vehicle detonated. There's something really, really wrong with this story. Why is the FBI lying about it? The other dimension is this Leibelsberger. He was 18 years in special forces, as in part of Green Beret, and his duty assignment. The DoD confirmed this. I saw last night per Jack Posobiec, that he was assigned to the barracks in Panzer Kaserne. Panzer Kaserne is a base southwest of Stuttgart, about 10 miles outside of Stuttgart. But it's not a base where you got a bunch of soldiers housed in barracks and they get out and drill every morning and march around and do their training. It's an admin post. And his real assignment was with European Special Operations Command, EUCOM, or USOC. And USOC, most likely assignment inside, not outside, inside Ukraine, working with CIA. He was working on drones. So this Leibelsberger then all of a sudden comes back to the United States. And what's fascinating is there are a bunch of emails and manifestos released that are ostensibly tied to him, except some AI analysis of those materials suggests they're written by two different people, number one. And number two, some of the information that's contained in there, for example, he wrote in this one, allegedly wrote in this one email, yeah, I'm headed to Mexico. Well, the next thing you know, he shows up. He's in Las Vegas. That's not Mexico. He's in Las Vegas.
What do you think is going on here?
I don't know. I would say there's some sort of psychological operation underway. It makes no sense.
Did he have knowledge, or did he express opinions about the drones that have been all over New Jersey in the past month?
Yeah, that was contained in this message, and he also in that message indicated that it was either Chinese, that they were Chinese drones, and that's what I'm saying. This may be part of a psychological operation, a message designed to create some anti-Chinese animus, because he talked about gravitational propulsion systems. Now, some could say, well, he was a Green Beret. He wouldn't necessarily have access to that kind of, to what they call the unidentified aerial phenomena, the UAPs, used to be called UFOs. However, there are, my understanding is there are special operations teams, and a Green Beret could be part of that if there is a suspected UAP that's fallen to the ground and needs to be recovered, that you would have a special military unit go out and do that recovery. And those people involved in such recovery operations would have special access program, aka SAP, clearances. So it's possible he was involved with that. We don't know. The one email message sent out claimed that he held TSSCI unacknowledged special access program clearance for the unidentified aerial phenomena. Maybe true, maybe not. That's what I said. There is so much misinformation. And look, the FBI, initially they came out, the report from the government. This wasn't a report from social media. Government said, oh yeah, we tested his DNA and the DNA didn't match his son. And therefore, he was upset that his wife had slept around. Well, wait a second. By virtue of his position with it as a Green Beret, the Army already has his DNA. Because, if he gets blown up on the battlefield, they want to make sure that the pieces they recover belong to him. So why do they need to check his son's DNA to find out if it's him? Find out, check your own damn DNA base and say, yeah, it's him or it's not him.
Was somebody else killed in that car and not this fellow?
We don't know. We don't know. And so you got to ask yourself, why is the government creating such confusion around this? And confusion around the fellow in New Orleans. One of the things they come up with is that, they were all at Fort Bragg, but it doesn't necessarily mean they were all at Fort Bragg at the same time. Hell, I was at Fort Bragg while some of them were there probably, because it's a big base. And the Green Beret, that's where they're trained and qualified. That's where they go through their qualification course on Fort Bragg. And they conduct their final exercise there. Whereas this guy Jabbar, he was an admin weenie. No disrespect to people who just do admin in the military, but he was not a fighter. And yet, when you get down and start looking at all the details about these events, it's Jabbar, who has zero experience building explosives, builds 2 improvised explosive devices that have sophisticated remote detonation capabilities. And the 18-year military vet who's actually been trained to build sophisticated explosives has a clown car arrangement of fuel cans and fireworks in the back of his Tesla Cybertruck. Very, very, very odd. So
have you seen the video of Jabbar taken from the Apple glasses that he had, showing him scoping out Bourbon Street?
Yeah, well, just ask
now
yourself.
You and I know the government had that video at the time he made it, because everything you do and say and communicate via your mobile devices, the government has.
Well, yeah, they have it
buying, but not putting anything it captures to any good use to keep people safe.
It doesn't really guarantee necessarily that, although it had been collected, that they would have been able to recognize it or identify it as an immediate threat. But ask yourself this question. This guy was in financial straits, difficult straits. He was not making tons of money. He didn't have a steady job. How does he afford a $2,000 pair of glasses? Okay. These are not your $50 bifocals that you pick up at the Kmart or Walmart.
The implication that I'm hearing from you is that Jabbar had help.
Yes.
And Leibelsberger may not be the person who died in that car. Yeah, if he did, he was murdered. He didn't kill himself.
Those are all possibilities. Because I can say honestly, I don't know. What I do know is we're looking at all of these unusual red flags that we've got video evidence that the FBI, the government, is lying about how that man died. They said he put a bullet in his head before the explosion went off. Categorical, irrefutable evidence that that's not true. So why are they lying about that? It's not that, our investigators made a mistake. No, come on. And then the other thing is the ID documents. I mean, this was a raging conflagration inside that car, yet miraculously, the passport and the ID card survive. His body's burned beyond recognition, but everything else is, hey, it's readable. We can see who it was. So, and part of what the message released in those manifestos are about how the Chinese are a threat. And the messages released that Jabbar as these Muslims are a threat. We got to watch out for those Muslims. And at the same time, Judge, 2 weeks ago, the State Department, my old office, who had issued a $10 million bounty on the former senior commander of ISIS that had connections with Al-Qaeda, which were claiming that, this guy swore allegiance to ISIS. Yeah, that's Al-Jilani. And we're now taking the $10 million bounty off his head, dressing him up in a suit. You know, I've said it's like, I don't know if you ever watched that television show. I actually did. I admit it. Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. You know, 4 gay guys who go in and fix up some heterosexual schlub, you know, actually make him presentable. That's what we've done with Jelani in Syria. All of a sudden he's wearing a beard and he looked very dignified, and you know, he's not chopping heads off anymore.
Right,
so you got to say, what's going on here? Because we've got the CIA on one hand, you know, playing buddy with ISIS, and then on the other hand, oh, it's ISIS, we got to be afraid, they're killing us all. And we're being told, the message out there, we got 1,000 undercover ISIS operatives in this country ready to launch terrorist attacks. Well, maybe we do, maybe we don't. But what I see is a lot of media manipulation going on. Chinese, ISIS, Chinese, ISIS. And yet the government then turns around and lies about critical aspects of this. Or they cover up information. The guy that tried to kill Trump at West Palm, you know, the Ryan Ralph, he reportedly, and I don't have a definitive number on this, at least 20 visits to Fort Bragg over the last 20 years, or over 140 visits. Judge, I was on Fort Bragg probably between 1994 and 2016, you know, 4 times a year at least. So, you know, well over 100 times. After 9/11, the only way you could get on that base is you had to have a military ID, or you had to have a contractor's badge that you were cleared onto it. Anybody else had to go through a long line and be vetted, etc. And you had to be able to explain why were you going on to the base. You couldn't just show up and say, I want to look around, see what's up. So what was he doing there that many times? All covered up. Well, pay no attention to that man over there. I'm just simply saying that the government's lying about a lot of things, or not coming clean with this information. And we need to know why.
Do we need the FBI?
Not in its current form. You know, I've talked to you know, I've got real good friends, because I used to work closely with the FBI. They say the problem started really with 9/11, where the FBI shifted from being an organization that was supposed to be investigating criminal activity. And look, everybody says, oh, wait a second, they were corrupt back in the 60s when J. Edgar Hoover was using them to go after Martin Luther King and others. Yes, I admit that. But really, if you can make the case, the 70s, 80s into the 90s, they were at least focused upon trying to do legitimate investigations without worrying about politics. After 9/11, they became a political outfit, and they have been conducting themselves like the Stasi, like the German secret police in the bad old days of East Germany.
Well, I can tell you from my end of things that you've probably heard me say this before, Larry, to you personally as well as on air, that since 9/11, a whole generation of federal agents has come of age, basically trained to forget about the Fourth Amendment. Gather the evidence first, let the prosecutors worry about the lawfulness of the gathering, even though these people have all taken the same oath you took and I took to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution.
Yeah.
Is it feasible that we could expect that Trump would do away with the operations department of the CIA, fancy word for the people that murder, kill, torture, conduct coups d'etats, and wage private secret wars?
Well, it needs to happen, but it's unlikely to happen. John Radcliffe is CIA director. What needs to happen is they're going to come in and say, okay, the entire covert action arm of the U.S. government, we're putting a stop to that. That stops now. We're going to stop the color revolutions. We're going to stop paying people to go out and try to overthrow other governments. We're going to stop funneling money to all these non-governmental organizations that are taking and paying people to go to the streets to protest in places like Georgia and Romania. We're going to focus on developing foreign intelligence assets, people who spy for us, people who betray their countries, but give us information about what their leadership, what their military is thinking, doing, and planning. We want information. We're not going to become the political actors. That's my ideal world. No, that's not going to happen, Judge. It should, but that's where the CIA has gone astray. I recommend all of your listeners, if they haven't read the book by Tim Weiner called Legacy of Ashes, that they do so, because he details just sort of one botched covert action after another, and it's been going on since 1947, since the inception of the CIA, and just before.
The NSA is in the Defense Department.
Right.
It's about 10% military and about 90% civilian. You and I, from work we've done elsewhere, are quite familiar with it. Because it's in the Defense Department, it works for the president. He could stop it with a phone call. They capture every keystroke on every mobile device, desktop, laptop, mainframe in the country. Donald Trump himself was personally victimized by this,
right,
by the NSA and the CIA and the FBI before he was president and while he was president.
Correct.
What are the chances that he shuts this down?
Well, there are ways that the NSA is supposed to operate, and then, as was exposed by Edward Snowden initially, where he said, "Hey, it's unfettered spying on all Americans." The 9/11 was used as the excuse to justify this encroachment on the Fourth Amendment in particular and the Constitution in general, that to justify the government coming in and invading everybody's privacy. And we always use these, that's where these terrorist attacks that you could almost say sometimes are allowed to happen or happen in order to justify, see, if we only had more opportunity to invade your privacy, this wouldn't happen. But it does happen, even though they have all of this capability. And so it becomes an excuse to abuse the Constitution. I believe, look, I'm a firm believer in that the admission of the NSA, let's collect intelligence. But as we saw what happened in the case of Donald Trump, a very simple example, the British identified George Papadopoulos. If anybody remembers his name, he was initially one of the Trump advisors on oil and energy policy. Right. A young guy with really little experience, but he made the mistake of placing a phone call from London to Corey Lewandowski back in the United States. I don't know if Lewandowski was in Washington, D.C. or New Hampshire. And that phone call was intercepted by British GCHQ. British GCHQ passes that to the NSA. NSA passes that to CIA. And then CIA, working with British intelligence, comes up with a plan to entrap Papadopoulos and use him ultimately as one of the linchpins or predicates to launch the Russiagate investigation against Donald Trump.
Oh,
so
correct.
I'm saying this was an organized effort that used both signals intelligence as well as human intelligence elements. It used all elements of the intelligence community to go after Donald Trump, and for one purpose, to try to destroy the presidency of Donald Trump.
Fascinating stuff, Larry. You are courageous to articulate it and dogged to do all of this research. Thank you for bringing it to us.
Yeah.
There will probably be more for you to tell us about between now and
factors, and we've got even more evidence of this because
up to a battalion of North Korean soldiers who've now joined Moscow's fight, and some Russian paratroopers. If that's in fact accurate, how impactful is that sort of defeat?
Well, it could be up to 1,000 soldiers that would be lost in a situation like that. Normal battalion size in the Russian military is somewhere between 600 and 800 soldiers, depending on the type of battalion. So let's cut it in half and say about 500 were lost. That's still somewhat significant in a specific operation. Now, it's not going to change the course of the war by itself. It's also not going to change exactly what the Russian goals are, but it could have a momentum of its own. And actions like this, if the Russians were in fact, and the North Koreans were in fact in a situation where they lost that many people, that could have a significant impact on their ability to carry forth operations in the Kursk area.
Mm.
An entire battalion of North Koreans.
I mean, just Nima, the propagandizing, right? The effort by media outlets like CNN to cheer the war on, whether it's in conversations like that, having on experts who I didn't catch who that was, but I guarantee his paycheck is coming directly or indirectly from either the Pentagon or from a foreign government or from weapons contractors. And we've got even more evidence of this because the Quincy Institute just put out Ben Freeman and Nick Cleveland Stout over there just put out a fantastic resource that I encourage people to go to. And the Quincy Institute is a think tank tracker. You can go and see where these think tanks that dominate American foreign policy, whose members are rife throughout American media, whether it be cable news or the printed press, where the money comes from. And what you see is that the vast majority of American think tanks that focus on foreign policy either receive dark money, so they don't tell anyone where that's coming from, as you know, that's no good, or they are openly saying, yes, we take money from weapons companies, we take money from foreign governments, we take money from the U.S. government. And you look at an organization like the Atlantic Council, which is prominent throughout the media. Just watching Al Jazeera, I had to suffer through a guy from the Atlantic Council on that. The Atlantic Council in the last 5 years has taken $40 million from weapons companies, foreign governments, and the American government. But then they get put onto the networks, they get quoted in the Post or the Journal or the Times as neutral and independent experts. And so that's just one way of promulgating the war, of ensuring that there's support behind the war, because even though many people are no longer watching Fox or CNN, many people are no longer trusting what the Post or the Times says. Those days are long gone. The problem is that many of the decision makers, the people in Capitol Hill, the people on Wall Street, the people in C-level suites in corporations, they still follow that news. They still take it as authoritative. But you see even on that map, though, that CNN put up there, just how it shows a portion of Ukraine. It shows the northern parts that Russia stormed into in the first week of the war and then withdrew within a month or so. And some of it was from Russian tactical and operational mistakes and errors in Ukrainian success. And others was because the Russians realized they overextended and they pulled back. I mean, there's a mix of it. But you see that the way that CNN made the map look, it makes it look like Ukraine has been winning this war since 2022. That, first of all, only shows the top third of Ukraine, doesn't show the bottom 2/3. But it with the way it colors it with the yellow, Ukrainian forces have retaken this territory from Russia since February 2022. Anyone who has not been following this and doesn't have the context or the 3-year history of this war would think, man, Ukraine has really stood up to the Russians, and look, they've given it back. And why are we not providing more support to Ukraine? It looks like if we abandon them now, we're giving up on them and we're betraying them. We're stabbing them in the back. How can we betray our allies? How can we allow an authoritarian dictator like Putin to overwhelm and destroy a democracy like ours? They're our allies. We've all heard that, right, for how many years now? And so that gets the importance of why this Kursk campaign. And it was a week or two ago, reports were coming out that the White House was telling Kiev to get your troops out of Kursk. They're going to get cut off. They're going to be destroyed. You need to get them out. And what does the government in Ukraine do? They do the opposite. And it's because you have the American elections coming up, Donald Trump's inauguration coming up in 2 weeks. And he's being certified today as we speak, actually. So this political maneuver, this stunt, just with the original purpose of this invasion of Kursk region by Ukraine in the summer, back in August. The idea being is that they have to demonstrate to the Americans in particular, don't give up on us. We're still a good bet. We can still keep waging this war. We can still take it to the Russians. We can give it as good as we get, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
No.
Essentially meaning that we can still receive your weapons and money. Look, if you continue to give us billions of dollars, we will stand up to Russia. You can use us for your political purposes. You will keep us afloat. You'll keep our corrupt government in power. We'll keep throwing. Look, we're changing our minds. We're going to start drafting all of our men from 18 and above up. Anyone who was given a medical waiver before now has to go back to the Ukrainian recruiting authorities and get examined again. Look, we're going to keep throwing more men into this furnace. You just keep giving us the money. And I think that's essentially the desire, what the goal is in launching this campaign again. And rather than doing the smart thing and getting out of Kursk and preserving forces, they're throwing their forces into this again, knowing that eventually whatever successes they've had in this campaign over the last day are eventually going to be halted, and then they're going to take severe losses, and it's losses that they can't afford to take, and so forth. But the purpose of this, again, is a political stunt 2 weeks before Donald Trump's inauguration to try and shore up support in the U.S. for Ukraine, to give them, to give voices in the United States that type of authority that, look, we can't give up on them now. Look what they're doing. They're still going on the offensive. And of course, the American media is all too happy to go along with this propaganda, even in spite of the fact that it is not going to improve Ukraine's position. It likely will cause harm in the sense of losing forces they can't afford to lose. And of course, the catastrophe of just throwing more men into a conflict that, the basic adage is still there. It's been there for 3 years now. This is a war that Ukraine can't win and Russia can't lose. But that type of understanding is forbidden in the American media and in most American political circles.
We cannot. So far, we know that Donald Trump, before 2024 presidential election, he was talking about that he's going to put an end to the conflict in 24 hours.
Right.
That's gone. And right now with Keith Kellogg and his proposal to the conflict in Ukraine, how do you see the changes that are happening? Is Donald Trump interested in putting an end to the conflict immediately, or we're going to have some sort of policy of bargaining with Russia? And I don't know how do they have, or if they really have some sort of upper hand in this bargaining type process.
Yeah, I think Trump's concern is to have a quick foreign policy victory. And his comments on the campaign trail were obviously geared for the campaign, geared for the election. And now it's the reality that this is not going to be as easy as I say it's going to be, particularly when the plan that they're going forward with, if they're keeping with the Kellogg plan that was introduced over the summer to end the war by freezing the front lines, by continuing American and European military support to Ukraine, and by promising Russia Ukraine won't receive NATO membership for at least 10 years or 15 years or however long it was said. All of those things are not acceptable to the Russians, and the Russians have already said that this isn't acceptable to us, but we're willing to talk. And so that's fine as long as the Trump administration is going into this with the idea of this is our starting position, as opposed to either these are already predestined, the predestined outcome of the negotiations. Because that's one of the things the Americans often do in negotiations with other countries, is they come in with their negotiating points as the final result, that this is what the negotiation will be, this will be the outcome, and that's it. and there's actually no attempt at any negotiations. So if that's the way the Trump administration is going to come into this, which there's no reason not to think that they won't, then it's going to go nowhere. And then at that point, I think Donald Trump will continue the war. And I think we'll be talking about the war in the same way we're talking about it now and have been for the last couple of years, a year from now. The idea being is that as long as the Ukrainian army can continue to stand, Russia will move slowly westward. I think that someone calculated, I can't remember who, but at the rate that the Russian army has moved in the last year, it'll take another full year just to capture the rest of the Donbass. I mean, so the idea that they're somehow going to push even further than that and knock Ukraine out of the war through a maneuver style type victory is just not there. And the attrition style victory is certainly possible. But the West and the Ukrainian government is betting on that, look, if we start drafting these 18-year-olds and up, if we get the West to send back all the hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men who have fled, if we can automatize this more, right? If we can use more drones and more robots and more AI, particularly for things like, particularly for not just fighting up front, but that we can take soldiers from rear unit missions and send them forward because we can have AI or technology or drones or whatever do their work, right? We don't need our air defense systems manned by people. We can have computers do that. And we've already seen that because they've moved their air defense folks up to the forward lines, not all of them, but some they push in the infantry, some of that because of shortages. We just don't have systems for these guys to man, so we might as well give them rifles and send them to the trenches. But other is part of this idea that we don't need these guys. The computers can do it. Right. So that's what they're banking on. And the big thing, of course, is that the money keeps coming, that the tens and tens and tens of billions of dollars that have kept the Ukrainian government in power and kept the Ukrainian economy afloat continues. Because I think that for me has always been the biggest challenge for the Ukrainians is keeping their government and their economy upright. Because once that collapses, then that's it. It's over. And the front lines will just take care of themselves. And you have chaos west of the Russian, west of the Donbass, essentially. You have a ruined, failed state. You also have warlords, and Afghanistan will look like Ukraine will look like Afghanistan or Syria. And so that's a very real danger. But the idea that Ukraine can't keep going, I think, is an idea that's popular among many analysts and observers, but I think that they can still keep going. And that's certainly what the government in Kiev and in the West, is banking on, particularly if the money keeps coming in. Because once that money stops, it's the collapse is dramatic. And we've seen that happen in Afghanistan once the threat of the money not coming in. And I think that's part of it as well, is this idea that trying to get Trump to promise to keep going. And he said that. He has said he's going to continue to supply weapons. He's going to continue to back Ukraine. He's walked away from his, I think, rather forceful position on this war to one of more of like, we'll see, I'm going to make my pitch to the Russians. And if they don't want to take it, then we'll continue this war. And I think that's what we're looking at. And that puts the Russians in a very difficult place. This is, why I've said for years now, this has been a strategic error of the Russians because they're stuck. They're gamble to force negotiations by a quick strike into Ukraine, to force negotiations to basically revive the Minsk II agreements failed. And I think that they did not fully appreciate the will of the West to continue this war. The idea that the West will spend hundreds of billions and eventually trillions of dollars on this war, will happily see Ukraine be destroyed to try and punish or hurt Russia somehow. And I think that was an underestimation or miscalculation by the Russians. And now here they are at this point where, again, they still haven't seized all the Donbass. The Ukrainians, as bad as things are, and as much as the Ukrainian army is falling back, there's still a lot of land. There's still a lot of territory. And the Russians don't want to occupy that territory. It was never their intention to conquer Ukraine, right? It was never their intention to make Ukraine a province of Russia or to make it a colony, or however, these people in the West that describe their intentions. That was never it. The idea was essentially to get Ukrainian neutrality. That was the main thing. And to ensure the revival of the Minsk II efforts, particularly to make the Donbass region semi-autonomous, have a federal type system there. So, the Russians are stuck. And so the idea that, Nima, a year from now in 2026, we're talking like this, I put good money on it, because it's hard to see where the loss of territory, because the Russians, as opposed to what they wanted 3 years from now, do want territory now. And they've said this for quite a while. And they keep saying that now they are going to keep these 4 oblasts, these 4 provinces of the Donbass. And they've also spoken about having to take more territory to have a buffer zone. I don't think they're very serious about that, but I could imagine how, you understand why they would say that. So the position we're in is a really bad position. I think the hopes of many that Trump was going to come in and be reasonable and essentially hold a gun, or pull the gun, I should say, away from the Ukrainians and say, look, it's over. You need to go and sit with them, figure this out. It's done. Is gone. And I think that was shattered a week after the elections, when we started to see who Donald Trump was putting into his government. And these are all, they're neocons, they're hawks. They have no other agenda other to, if not expand the empire, then to maintain it. And so I like I said, again, I'll say, I'm afraid that in 2026, our first show of 2026, we'll be having a similar conversation. And I hope that's not the case, of course.
Matt, do you think that the European Union right now, we have some sort of division, and this division is getting much more serious as time goes by?
Right.
Because right now, Ukraine has just cut off the Russian gas to Slovakia and other countries, and it seems that there is some sort of happiness in Poland. For example, the foreign minister of Poland, Sikorski, said Ukraine has this leverage on Russia, but at the end of the day, we know they're harming these European countries.
Right.
To manage the situation in Europe would be a great challenge, I think, for whoever is in the United States.
Yeah, the Americans are making it worse. The new round of sanctions Serbia's state-owned oil company as well, because of their relationship with the Russians. And so you're going to have an energy crisis in Serbia now. And that only drives the Serbs closer to the Russians. Of course, the Serbs and the Russians already have that relationship, the historical relationship. But in terms of trying to keep a lid on tensions in Europe, it doesn't help. And this whole issue with shutting off the pipeline through Ukraine to deliver oil, gas. I think it was primarily at this point, it was only going to Hungary and Slovakia, but still, the loss of revenue to the Ukrainians, which I'm sure the Americans have said we will, in the EU have said we will make up for you, don't worry. But I think the controversy over it, the discussion over it, causes such great harm. The loss to the Russians, they've already lost a great deal of the gas market in Europe. That's hard for them to make up, because all their gas infrastructure is facing westward. So for them to build out and start sending gas to the east is going to take time, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And I know they're in negotiations to do this with China, and China's not giving them a sweetheart deal. I mean, so, but the loss for their gas has been made up with their success with their oil over the last few years. And so the billions that Gazprom is losing for this is really not a factor to the Russians overall. Certainly it hurts, but it's not that big a deal. And this is not going to bring about a crisis or a collapse or some type of economic downturn in Russia that's going to cause this great uprising from the Russian people, who are then going to pull down the Russian government, and that exists in the fantasies of those, in Washington and London and Brussels and Paris and Berlin and other places. So, I mean, you see this tension in Europe. You see certainly the cost of energy having a profound impact on the European economy. I mean, look at Germany, the best example. Germans are paying to make a car in Germany now costs 4 times as much as it costs to make that same car in the United States, primarily because of energy costs. I mean, Europe overall, their energy costs are twice as much as the United States. The United States has benefited from this because when people talk about there being no winners in the Ukraine war, well, actually there has been. There has been. The American fossil fuel, the American oil and gas companies, they have won. Because it went from the Russians dominating the European natural gas market to the Russians being forced out, including the destruction, the sabotage by the U.S. of the Nord Stream pipelines, right? Which is something that is left out all the time in these media conversations about this, or it just says they talk about the pipeline getting destroyed as if it was some we'll never know who did it, right? Some great mystery. But the success for the Americans was that as the Russians were not able to pipe their gas to Europe, the harm that caused the Europeans, the Americans benefited because it was our ships, as well as the Qataris, that are bringing all that LNG to Europe, which is much more expensive, and they've had to build terminals, or they've had to lease terminals, and all kinds of things just to get that product into their market, and it's again more expensive. So, I mean, this is one of the great reasons for the Ukraine war. This, I believe, I've from the outset, my thoughts have been that this war has 2 principal causes: megalomania on all sides, but then also too greed. Just flat out greed. And the oil and gas is the best example of that. And this goes back, this isn't something that starts in 2022. This goes back more than a decade in the United States. As the United States starts fracking under the Obama administration, we start having all this gas. What are we going to do with it? Where are we going to sell it? And then you see this merger that exists already because they're the elites of the empire. So they already have a shared relationships, shared worldviews. They understand what benefits one benefits the other. And this is the way it's been, a big shock that, right, the fossil fuel elites are allied with the military industrial elites, allied with the intelligence elites, allied with the political elites, the media elites, right? Big shock, right? But this is the way it's worked. It's worked for, in our modern era, very well for the American empire in a lot of ways. So what you have starting around 2012 or so is you start seeing the American oil and gas companies start putting in all these permits for either new construction or expansion of their liquid natural gas export facilities, such as at Cove Point in Virginia. And at the same time, you start seeing a heightening of tensions. The second Obama administration drops the whole reset with Russia thing. If people remember, Obama, that famous exchange between Obama and Mitt Romney in the 2012 presidential debate, where Romney says that Russia is the greatest threat or the greatest adversary of the United States. And Obama says something like, hey, Mitt, the Cold War's calling, they want your worldview back. They want their worldview back, but then you start to see a shift almost immediately in that second administration of Obama, away from some type of engagement or cooperation or rapprochement with Russia to adversarial, a confrontation. And some of it drives from this one. It's been there. I mean, the American foreign policy establishment didn't need any convincing that Russia needs to be an adversary. The Pentagon, particularly the Army, didn't need any convincing that Russia needs to be an adversary, because if you want to be the next Omar Bradley, or you want to be the next, General Patton, then, you need to have an adversary like Russia, an adversary like China. Certainly the Afghan and Iraq wars don't allow the Army to put more armored brigade combat teams into Europe, right? I mean, so you start to see this confluence of interests in the second Obama administration that makes it so that Russia is the perfect adversary for us. And there's also all the historical stuff, the Red Scare going back 100 years in the U.S. The Brits even longer. They're at, their issues with the Russians. The lion versus the bear, whole nonsense that's been going on for centuries. So yeah, I mean, you get to this point now that we are seeing the fulfillment of the oil and gas role in the creation of this war, it now causing fairly predictable consequences, political consequences in Europe, because they're the ones who are literally paying the price. So you see things like even what's happening in Austria right now, where the Austrian, the far right party in Austria is in negotiations to, take a lead role in the government. I mean, so you've seen things shift, and that's all. There's other factors such as the immigration and refugee issues, which, of course, what are those from? That's from the wars in the Middle East. Where do those people come from? Why did they come to Europe? It's because of the wars in the Middle East. So if the Europeans are upset about this, maybe they should build a time machine and go back and not support and take part in those wars in the Middle East that caused. So you see a lot of this where it's a self-inflicted harm by the Europeans on themselves for continuing to go along with the Americans, but they are first among equals in the American empire, and they're not going to do anything to jeopardize that.
How do you see the influence of the Biden administration on the European Union for more than we are approaching 3 years of the conflict in Ukraine? The way that they have tried to manage the situation in Europe and convince them that, as you mentioned, the economy of Germany has been destroyed during this conflict. Mm-hmm. And right now, do you think with the coming administration, with the Trump administration, that would change in the European Union, or are we going to have the same sort of mindset, manner toward the conflict in Ukraine?
I think it's going to be the same mindset. I mean, well, depending upon elections, but even like with the Germans who are scheduled to have elections next month, the main opposition party, the CDU, right? They're in favor of the Ukraine war. So even if you have these smaller left-wing, right-wing parties doing well, at this point, for some nations like in Britain or say in Germany, it hasn't changed the overall foreign policy focus of those countries. Now that might change, that might affect it. I can't imagine the Brits ever will. They're so stuck in their own past glory that I don't think they'll ever change. But maybe for France or some other nations, you could have a reversal from their previous hardcore support for the Ukraine war. Certainly the Europeans are not looking forward to the inauguration in 2 weeks of Donald Trump. The relationship between the Trump administration and the EU was, to put it simply, hard, during Trump's 4 years. So I think there's an expectation that Trump is going to make demands of the Europeans. He already has made demands of the Europeans. Just a few weeks ago, he was talking about how if the Europeans don't increase their defense spending to 5% of GDP, he's going to start tariffing. He's going to start putting tariffs on all their, right? So there's already that. So that's what they're going into. There are these issues, right? These divisions in Europe that Trump, who say like with Hungary, big, him and Viktor Orban, their camps are big fans of each other. So you can see how Trump could also engender that type of spirit in various right-wing opposition political groups throughout Europe, causing greater political tension, greater political stress. Trump is one who holds a grudge. Trump is one who takes things very personally. So if it gets to the point where he's having these disagreements with the European Union, I'm sure he would love to stir things up and cause problems. And eventually, if it got so bad that this is just, pure, now I'm going to be hyperbolic, but if the European dissolved because of Trump would see that as a victory, and I'm exaggerating, of course, but that's not going to happen. But that, I could see him having that type of mindset about this. So the Europeans certainly are wary of Trump coming back. They enjoy the Democrats because the Democrats are clear in their foreign policy. They clearly understand their role in the American empire under the Democrats. They again are first among equals. All the various aspects of, say, the empire the military, the economic, the political, the information aspects of empire. The Europeans benefit greatly from that. And so anyone who's going to shake it up in any way, they don't want to see, even if, don't get me wrong, Trump is not about ending the American empire. It's more for him, I think, a revisioning or restructuring of the empire. As it's not about reforming it. It's not about dismantling it or ending it or anything. It's about shaking it up for his friends to get more benefits from, essentially. So for the tech companies, right, and the finance companies to do even better than they have done. I think that's what the Europeans are expecting. And I think it's going to be tumultuous. It's going to be difficult. I think we're going to see a lot of fights between the Europeans and the Americans in the next 4 years. But I think the Europeans, if they don't lose power themselves because of their own decisions, again, getting back to this idea that the harm that they brought upon their people is entirely self-inflicted, that if they don't address that, then that will be their demise. It won't be because of what the Americans do.
Do you think that Donald Trump is capable of forcing Ukrainians to give up on joining NATO? Because Zelensky is talking about, for any sort of ceasefire, for any sort of negotiations, there has to be some sort of guarantee for Ukraine joining NATO.
Yeah, and that is the main issue for the Russians, is this Ukrainian neutrality. It's in Ukraine's constitution that they will join NATO. This is what hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, what Ukrainian mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and children have been told why their fathers have been destroyed, why they have been eviscerated by this machine of this war, was because of the need for Ukraine to join NATO. And so now to walk back on that, it's going to be very difficult. I mean, certainly you're seeing public opinion polls in Ukraine that show a continuing rise in support among the Ukrainians for a negotiated settlement, including polling that shows perhaps a half of Ukrainians would be in favor of territorial concessions to Russia to end the war. So you're seeing that. But the idea that the Ukrainians are going to give up this pursuit of NATO, I don't know if that is how well accepted that would be. It's interesting, though, if you go and you look back at public opinion polls before this war, particularly you go back several years, or you go back even before the coup in 2014, Ukrainians were ambivalent on joining NATO. There certainly were some who wanted it, some who were dead set against it. Many were just, we don't care, we don't want to be involved, it's not our thing. To get back to that mindset, but certainly that's the crux of this. And what many point to as the what should be the framework for Ukrainian neutrality is the Austrian neutrality from the it was brokered in 54 or 56 or whatever it was, that established Austria as a neutral state, and that was very successful. But there's nothing coming from the American NATO side that seems to offer any idea that we are interested in a neutral Ukraine. I mean, some of these proposals for what peace would look like, including having like Western European troops in Ukraine as peacekeepers. I mean, it's just, come on, that's just insane, right? I mean, it's idiotic. Like, how will you think that would be acceptable to the Russians? And the Russians are not going to move off of this thing. They've just lost hundreds of thousands of their men wounded and killed in these 3 years. And they generally see this as a national security issue for them. They're fighting this war because they don't want to fight a bigger war against NATO. And they firmly believe that. Doesn't matter if you and I don't agree with it. You and I think it's nonsense. Doesn't matter at all. It matters what the Russians actually think. And they think this for a host of reasons, some of them historical. This has been the Russian experience going back to Charles XVI from Sweden or whoever, right? As well as too, just the reality of the encroachment of NATO and what the West, particularly the Americans, have done since the end of the Cold War to loot Russia, to humiliate, to try and control it. I mean, all various nefarious acts as the Russians see it. They see the Ukraine war as a defensive war or as a preventive war. And so the idea that they're going to give up then on what their chief goal was of a neutral Ukraine, I can't imagine it. And just also too, just our understanding of who the Russians are and who they are as a people, for them to back down on that. But both sides, the idea of a negotiated settlement, is of course the only thing that's going to work. But whether or not you can get both sides to that point, and when I say both sides, I mean the Americans and the Russians, where concessions are made that are acceptable to one another, and then forcing the Ukrainians to go along with it, which of course is just as easy enough as saying, look, we'll pull our funding. And the Ukrainians, of course, at that point have if Zelensky and company want to stay in power, a whole other issue too of whether or not the Russians would allow that, but just say they do. They're dependent upon U.S. foreign assistance and European foreign assistance as well. And this, I have to imagine that for the Europeans, particularly if you get some out, if you get Schultz out, you get Macron out, then it's a lot easier for those governments to go along with a new approach to Ukraine, and they can spin it however they need it. Keir Starmer in Britain, he'll do that. So you'll have this new approach, and then of course they'll all pat themselves on the back because they stood up to the tyrant Vladimir Putin, and we defended democracy against autocracy, et cetera, et cetera. Winston Churchill was lighting up a cigar in heaven, celebrating us right now, toasting us with his brandy or whatever he drank. That will be their line, and that's fine. Because if that's what it takes to end this thing and to stop the slaughter, stop the destruction of Ukraine, so be it. But we still are, even with Trump coming into office, a long way from that. And so we'll see. And I don't have much faith in Keith Kellogg, but I will wish him well and wish him the best. And maybe I'll go to church and light a candle for his efforts or something like that. Because at least you could say this about Trump. At least it's being talked about, and at least he put someone like a guy like Kellogg into that position of envoy for the Ukraine war, whatever they're calling him. At least there's that, right? I'm not optimistic at all, but at least they're doing that, so we can at least say that, I think.
As you've mentioned, from what we've seen so far from these people, Keith Kellogg and Waltz and all of these people who are going to work with Donald Trump, it seems that in 2026 we're going to talk about Ukraine again and again.
Yeah.
And here comes the question. If the war in Ukraine continues through 2026 and beyond, and who's Donald Trump in the Middle East? Is he the guy that Netanyahu is dreaming about to bring a big war in favor of Israel, or it's going to be totally different?
I think, what happens after Inauguration Day in the U.S. is that the 2026 election campaigns begin. And the Republicans have a very tiny majority in the U.S. House, and they've got a handful of four, I think. I think they've got 54 senators in the Senate. And so slim there as well. The fear then for the Trump administration will be that we'll lose the House in the elections, and maybe we'll lose the Senate, and then we won't get anything done. And so, and the way the Republicans are, you see the Republicans really trying hard to exercise discipline over their own caucus, because they know that we want to get any more of these tax cuts. We want to get any of this deregulation. We want to get any of this immigration reform. We need to do it now, because we'll probably lose the House again in 2026, because that's what happens in the U.S. political system. That's what happens. Happened with Biden, happened with Trump before, happened with Obama. Took a while under Bush somehow, but eventually 2006 it happens. So that's the fear, and tying this into an American war with Israel on Iran, the economic consequences are going to be catastrophic, right? I mean, so the Iranians, if they take the attack as it's being explained, how it would be devastating and on, the Iranians, of course, will close the Straits of Hormuz, and oil will go to $200 a barrel, and gas in the United States will go to $7 or $8. And that could have very great effects on the Republicans keeping the House in November of 2026. And so that's the calculations that are being made right now in terms of, so now certainly the Trump administration is dominated by those who want to go to war with Iran. This is an obsession of the United States for 40 years. I mean, this is a generational obsession of the foreign policy community in the United States since 1979 of war with Iran. It certainly serves Israel's interests. But the Israelis, I don't know what benefit the Israelis get from it other than the fact that they want it, that they want to punish Iran, that they want to inflict violence just for violence sake on Iran. They know they can't conduct regime change through airstrikes, but they'll just do it because this is what we do to our enemies. We punish them. This is what God commands, Deus vult, if you will, take the Crusader term, God wills it. I mean, you've seen that essentially that underlines the whole construct of the genocide, right? God is willing this. But the Israelis, I don't think, are certain what they want to do. Because we saw over the weekend, I don't know if you saw this, Nima, conversation in Israeli media about Egypt and how Egypt is violating the ceasefire terms and the peace agreement, and that, we may have to do something about Egypt because they're mucking around in the Sinai. And we should take this very seriously, because we know that we hear this, we see Israeli soldiers with the arm patches, right, that are from the not from the river to the sea, but from the Nile to the Euphrates. You hear political commentators, political leaders, saying that from the Nile to the Euphrates. So certainly the idea that Israel wouldn't try to take the Sinai, I'm not putting it past them. But the idea of what do they get out of these strikes with Iran, other than the political support that Netanyahu believes it would engender, it help his government stay afloat. That itself, by itself, is a reason enough, right? Again, this idea is this is what they've wanted. This is what they God calls them to do this. If you're going to have a greater Israel, we have to do something about the Iranians. It's violence for the violence sake. We have to punish our adversaries. Maybe they are truly concerned about an Iranian nuclear weapon, but that's still, even if the Iranians were to enrich their uranium up until to 90% next week, it's still going to take them a heck of a long time to build delivery systems and all that. But you understand that fear with the Israelis, because once that happens, they lose their dominance of the region with their nuclear weapons. So you can understand that. But this idea of, I think for the Israelis, rationally, what they have to look at is what's best for our annexation of the West Bank. And a war with Iran, is that going to help us or hurt us with the annexation of the West Bank? Now, they may say the best thing to do, of course, is to have the Americans fight the Iranians, and then we can concentrate on the West Bank. That, of course, if there was a U.S. war with Iran, just a war of airstrikes and everything, that would dominate the news, and no one would pay attention at all to what the Israelis are doing in the West Bank. And it certainly would not allow the Iranians to reinforce Hezbollah, or certainly do anything to help the Palestinians. I mean, so that's some of the logic there too, why it makes sense for the Israelis to have the Americans, do this war with Iran. Certainly, I think there are some in the Biden administration who see that logic. And so the fear that the Biden administration may launch strikes against Iran in the next 2 weeks is there. I don't think it's likely, but we shouldn't even be having that conversation. But that's how maniacal, and that's how imperially mad the Biden White House is, that we actually have to consider that they would do something like that. I mean, it's preposterous, the idea that an American president would give his successor a war, a major war with Iran. But that's the madness of this White House. That's the madness of the whole American empire, essentially. That is in the realm of possibility. So, I mean, all these things, you put together and you say, okay, you could see how, even though it doesn't make sense rationally, you're not going to remove even if you kill the supreme leader, let us get another one. If you knock out their oil and gas infrastructure, that's going to destroy the world economy. So what are the benefits of this? Particularly since you've both checked each other. You've both launched ballistic missiles at one another and have shown that you're willing to do that. Why carry that any farther? So for the Israelis, I think this calculation, and I'm speaking very, rationally here and objectively, and of course now we're talking about Netanyahu and his cabinet, and they're not rational, objective people at all. They're very smart, they're very competent, they're very capable, effective people, but they're not rational in the sense that you and I and our the folks watching think. So yeah, the idea of a war of attack on Iran doesn't make sense in a lot of ways. But then when you stop and you think about the Israeli perspective and what they want to accomplish and how they feel they can use the Americans to help them accomplish that, particularly again, their goal being the annexation of the West Bank and what they would need as supporting efforts for that. Because that's essentially what a war with Iran would be for the Israelis, would be a supporting effort to their campaign to annex the West Bank. So we'll see. And then, but what the Israelis have a lot of, excuse me, the Israelis have a lot of options. We see what they're doing in Lebanon. We're coming close to the end of that ceasefire agreement. The Israelis keep destroying towns, taking towns, just, I don't know how many ceasefire violations a day, but it's clear that the Hezbollah has says, look, we're patient for the period that we agreed to be patient for, but after that, we're not going to be patient. You see the Israelis continue to expand their presence in Western Syria. They keep pushing farther from their annexed Golan Heights. They've moved farther north along the Syria-Lebanon border, creating more of a buffer, right, between, I think the big fear is that there are still a lot of weapons in Syria, and the Israelis don't want to see those weapons going into Lebanon or getting into Palestine. We've seen that already happen with Libya being the best case, right, where all those weapons went throughout Africa, as well as a lot of those weapons via the CIA went to Syria. And the Israelis understand that. So, they have to maintain that presence there in Syria as they see it. And then now you've got people on Israeli television stirring the pot about Egypt. And again, that's part of their design. It's part of greater Israel, So, this coming year, what is going to occur in the Middle East we've said this before, right? It'd be fascinating if this was a Netflix television show, but it's not. And so the horror, the possibility, and the idea that was Gaza just the prologue, right? Was Gaza just the opening act? And I think we've said this before about how the Balkans War of 1912, 1913 being an opening act that horrified the world. A million and a half people were killed. People worldwide were shocked by that war in the Balkans, and then 1914 came. And so is that possible we're seeing in the Middle East, where this is a precursor, Gaza, God help me for saying this, it's just a precursor for what's coming? I don't know, but we certainly don't have the Israelis are predisposed for action. They've always been predisposed to act first, to not wait, to be proactive. It's clear, right? And so you've seen that as well this last 15 months. The thought that they'll do anything differently, it doesn't make sense. So what they do, we're all waiting to see. But as we talk about this, I've got a very heavy pit in my stomach.
Do you think that the situation in Syria, in any sort of, if they start, these people who are in power, HTS and all these groups in Syria, is Israelis, let's put it this way, what do they think about these people? Are they really thinking that in a long run they can get along with these people, or they see that these people are a threat to Israel?
As you were saying, I was struck by the title of Max Blumenthal's book about Syria, The Management of Savagery. And essentially this idea that we can control these people. I mean, now we get back to, everyone pull out your copy of Chalmers Johnson's, right, Blowback. I mean, the idea that these groups can be managed, that they don't have any agency of their own, that they're not going to adhere to their principles, they're not going to adhere to their own experience. I think that certainly HTS is playing the field, and their foreign minister has gone out and he's meeting Saudis, the Qataris. We saw over the weekend the French and German foreign ministers show up in Damascus and meet with al-Sharar or al-Jilani, whatever you want to call them. So you're seeing this courting. And it reminds me of what Daoud, the prime minister of Afghanistan, said in the mid-'70s about how he would light his American cigarettes with Soviet lighters. The idea of like, how did that work out, Daoud? You didn't make it. You yourself didn't make it more than a couple of years after that statement. So, the idea that the Israelis, I think, of course, they obviously believe that HTS wants power. They want Syria. They are more like the Taliban than the Islamic State in the sense that they are locally focused on their caliphate as opposed to having an international caliphate. But that's not where they come from. These are Al Qaeda, right? I mean, so their vision, maybe it has changed. Maybe they are willing to accept what they've been given and go from there. But certainly the Israelis do believe that they can utilize HTS as a hedge against the Iranians. I guess they feel they can cooperate enough with the Turks. You're certainly a hedge against Hezbollah. The big thing for the Israelis in Syria are the Kurds. HTS relationship with them, how HTS will handle that. And this gets very complicated now, right, because of the Turks. And the Turks' goal in Syria is not HTS governing in Damascus. It's getting rid of the pseudo-Kurdish state of the autonomous Kurdish zones, Rojava, in eastern Syria. And, for the Israelis who've had a long relationship with the Kurds, but especially over the last 10 years or so, as the Israelis have started receiving Kurdish oil, this is a very key relationship. I mean, so now you get into all how just all the fingers, all the interests that are involved in here, this great game. Because now you see, okay, what are the Americans going to do guarding those oil fields? Why have they been guarding Syria's oil fields? Well, it's to make sure that Assad's government didn't get anything, so to weaken Assad's government, punish the Syrian people. But also, too, where did that oil go? And we're not really sure. But the best guess is that I shouldn't say guesses. The people with the people who I think understand this the best understand the Syrian Kurds take the oil. Perhaps a couple hundred trucks a day, and they sell it to their Iraqi Kurdish cousins. And this oil is protected by the Americans. The American army protects this oil and enables this the pumping and the sale and the transit of it. The Iraqi Kurds then take it and they send it via Turkey to port, and then the ships take it to Israel. And this, of course, is a big deal for Israel because the Kurdish production is several 100,000 barrels a day. And this is a big energy issue for Israel. So keeping the Kurds and having that relationship with them and having that the benefit of that oil, that's got to be a primary thing for the Israelis. But the Israelis are also walking with a very big stick, which is something that HTS, I think, understands. And so even, Al-Jilani, who, if I'm correct about this, that nom de guerre, Al-Jilani refers to him being from the Golan Heights. And I mean, so it's in his own personal background, his own personal history. We would think that a guy like this, everything he's done, everything he's lived for these last couple of decades, would have as his ultimate goal taking his homeland back from the Israelis. So this whole question of how the Israelis are imagining this relationship with HTS, how it could go, all the other interests involved here, didn't even talk about the Qataris, right? Didn't even talk about the Saudis in this. What are the Jordanians doing? The Jordanians are just trying. I'm sure the Jordanian, if people have the ability to invest in something, I would say invest in Jordanian construction and earth moving companies, because I guarantee right now the Jordanians are doing everything they can to build out their border because they don't want any HTS success to bleed over into Jordan, right? I mean, so again, another fascinating aspect. We were talking about the great game essentially of the Middle East. And then here you have as a subset of that, what's happening in Syria. And, just to make sure it's clear for everyone, though, all what we're saying and all these powers and interests that are there, I didn't even talk about the Russians either. All these powers and interests that are there, Annalisa Baerbock showing up, over the weekend and hanging out with al-Sharar, what does it mean for the Syrian people themselves? And are any of these nations actually going to do anything that will help the Syrian people? And is HTS sincere in having an inclusive government? And from some of the stuff we're seeing, it doesn't look that way. Some of the stuff coming out this weekend, whether the fact that, the Syrian news agency, they showed a photo of Jelani with the French and German foreign ministers, and they blurred out Annalisa's face, right? You know what I mean? So not a good start. You saw reports about the HTS changing the Syrian educational system, making it an Islamic education system. A lot of reports about massacres, atrocities being committed. How much of that is just the score settling that you'd expect after a victory like that? And how much of it is this continuation of the war, of the extermination of the sectarian violence? How much of it is that, as opposed to just, this is the bloodletting you'd expect? I was listening to, I'd never heard this number before, and it makes complete sense. I was listening to Jonathan Landis, who's out of Oklahoma, who's one of the best Americans to talk about Syria. And but Landis was talking about how the estimates were that after the Nazis were defeated, after the Nazi occupation ended in France, 10 to 20,000 French were executed as collaborators. Right? I mean, so there's always going to be that bloodletting, that score settling. Afghanistan is remarkable because we saw very little of that. Right? The United Nations had it in the low hundreds, the number of people that were killed extrajudicially, killed in score settling following the Taliban victory. I mean, that's frankly amazing. And so we don't know what's happening in Syria. We see different reports, people downplaying it, other people saying, no, this is really bad. And time, of course, will tell. And, so all these things, the dust is all still there in Syria. So, maybe in a month or two, we'll have a better idea of what they're going to do. But at this point, we don't know. And what were the German and French demands when they met with, the report I was reading this weekend is that the Syrians need $1 billion a month just to pay their civil servants. And they don't have that. Where is that $1 billion going to come from? $1 billion from the Qataris or the Saudis or even the Europeans is very doable. What's going to be the ask, though? What's going to be the and so you can imagine, particularly Baerbock, her first demand would be the Russians need to get out, and the Americans, of course, have visited a couple times now with high profile delegations. I guarantee the Americans are in talks with HTS all the time. And their main concern, of course, is they'll say it's Islamic State. It's not. Their main concern is Israel. And what are they, and as well as Russia, get Russia out. So all that. And the Turks, of course, have their, Turks are the ones who put this whole thing in the last couple of months in motion. That HTS owes their presence in Damascus to the Turks. Erdogan and his folks are clear on what they want to see happen in Syria vis-a-vis the Kurds. So there's a lot happening here. Certainly not an easy entry into 2025, whether in Europe or in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Country to
Next on deck with Tim Black.
That he wants to do something for the Dreamers. He has also talked about the need for people to come in to the country to do certain kinds of things.
I want black people in it. I'm tired of black people saying, Tim, this is not our conversation. Tim, this is not our fight.
I want it to become our fight. Black children need this. We need STEM training for our kids. Abby Phillips.
That he wants immigration reform, that he wants to do something for the dreamers. He has also talked about the need for people to come in to the country to do certain kinds of things. And then you have these other new supporters of Donald Trump who understand that if you're just recruiting like the top 0.1% of the best and most talented, say engineers from around the world, that's probably a good thing. I think where there's great alignment is on the need to eliminate the fraud in the program. And I think some of these visa programs are being used to bring people in for no other reason than to displace American workers and to do things more cheaply. So I think the common ground and the way forward is bring in the people who are the goats, of engineering from around the world. Bring those people here and then focus on American workers, American students for everything else. And that would be a good blend of how I think this is going to move forward.
That might be the case, but Laura Loomer is saying don't bring Indians into America. I mean, she's pretty clear about what she's
I don't know if she's watched many Bollywood movies, but not only are they very good, but they're actually a lot more modest than Hollywood films. So that comment was a little bit off base, but
what's that got to do with anything? What's this guy talking about? Now, people that are questioning what's going on with their immigration, people that are questioning H-1B visas, those people are not all Laura Loomers. Laura Loomer's a very extreme stance, which is, I don't want no Indians coming in the country. Now, that's not the conversation. That's not the debate. The debate is, do we bring in, does the H-1B visas, does that hurt American workers? I'd also add, if you say, hey, we need these specialized people for the O-1 visas, the people with the advanced degrees, the people that are the 0.1% of educated people in certain disciplines such as engineering, computer engineering, for instance, we want them to come in the country. Meanwhile, what we're going to do is we're going to develop a program here in the United States where we're going to take young people and we're going to start a program that's going to prepare them to fulfill those positions domestically. Yeah, America has the capability, if it really wanted to train American people, to train American youth, to take students and walk them through the process, to give their families the wraparound support that will be necessary to have those children grow to be in those types of positions. It's very possible. Folks, I just want to say, let's cut through the nonsense. What good is it having a country that they say is one of the richest countries that have ever existed on the globe? And then when it comes to education, we got to go other places because the education system does not give the type of support that's necessary to help our children get to where they need to go. What do we do now, Tim? Okay, fine. Commit to a program that's going to train the next generation now. And we're going to have some black people put in that. I want black people in it. I'm tired of black people saying, Tim, this is not our conversation. Tim, this is not our fight. I want it to become our fight. Black children need this. We need STEM training for our kids. Science, technology, math, engineering, math. If they're focusing on it, fine, let's focus on it. I'm not one of the people that say, oh, I'm black, I don't need to know about this. That's between them. No. You don't have to watch. You don't have to be concerned. This ain't about you. It's about your children. You work at Amazon, dog. This ain't about you. You drive Uber or Lyft. This ain't about you. I make videos. I got a small media company. It's so small. When people say, Tim Black, you're a small business person, I say, I'm a small business person. Maybe like, I couldn't hear you. I'm a small business person. Huh? Why are you speaking so low? Because I got to whisper it, because that's how small my company is. So when I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about my son, Chase. I'm talking about my granddaughters, Nailani and Nadia and Naomi. Not talking about me. This ain't about you. Okay? So let's keep going. So they had this conversation, this back and forth and back.
And right now, it's like they're going after Elon Musk and they're going after Vivek because they said, hey, we need to compete today. We need to go in and get these people. But they're not talking about putting together the program that I just suggested. In fact, I didn't get that from anyone. I'm not watching anyone's content to see what they're coming up with. What's an idea? No, it ain't rocket science. I believe that most of them, the MAGA people that are pissed off right now, most of the regular American citizens who are not MAGA, who when they hear this, who have an obvious and immediate reaction to it, some of them are going to feel the way I do. And to them, I want them to consider this. Why can't we have a program here that prepares our kids to tackle this?
The H-1B very well, and it's something that I frankly use, and I shouldn't be allowed to use. We shouldn't have it. Very, very bad for workers. And second of all, I think it's very important to say, well, I'm a businessman, and I have to do what I have to do, and it's sitting there waiting for you, but it's very bad. It's very bad for business in terms of, it's very bad for our workers, and it's unfair for our workers, and we should end it.
It seemed very clear. That was him in a debate back in 2016. He looks all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. He had some rose color in his cheeks. That was a young Donald Trump. He was only like 70. But yeah, here's the point, guys. He didn't seem like he was, hedging at all.
Right now, widespread abuse in our immigration system is allowing American workers of all backgrounds to be replaced by workers brought in from other countries to fill the same job for sometimes less pay. This will stop. American workers have long called for reforms to end these visa abuses, and today their calls are being answered for the first time. But what I want to do and what I will do is you graduate from a college, I think you should get automatically as part of your diploma a green card to be able to stay in this country. And that includes junior colleges too. Anybody graduates from a college, you go in there for 2 years or 4 years. If you graduate or you get a doctorate degree from a college, you should be able to stay in this country. And you know more stories than I do, but I know of stories where people graduated from a top college or from a college, and they desperately wanted to stay here. They had a plan for a company, a concept, and they can't. They go back to India, they go back to China, they do the same basic company in those places, and they become multi-billionaires employing thousands and thousands of people, and it could have been done here. And a bigger example is you need a pool of people to work for your companies. You have great companies, and they have to be smart people. Not everybody can be less than smart. You need brilliant people. And we force the brilliant people, the people that graduate from college, the people that are number one in their class from the best colleges, you have to be able to recruit these people and keep the people. It was such a big deal. Somebody graduates at the top of the class. They can't even make a deal with the company because they don't think they're going to be able to stay in the country. That is going to end on day one.
Okay. I guess that was Trump when he was campaigning to run before this election. So that's not even now. I don't know how current this is. But I can tell you, I don't have a clip of him speaking to this, but what I can tell you is he's in agreement with Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk as far as he also wants to promote and expand the H-1B visa opportunities. Currently, 65,000 positions or 65,000 slots. And there's 25,000 slots for O1 visas. There are people that are, critical of this. They say, well, you know what? Elon Musk and Vivek, they just want cheap labor that they can exploit. And you bring in this great talent from other countries, but then you get to underpay them for that same ability, that same expertise. You have to pay 20, 30% more to an American citizen. Folks, so we really think that these corporations, these contractors, we don't think that they would game the system? When America brings in low-skilled workers, for instance, low-skilled workers to work in our plants and work in our fields, we say, well, we got America's workers who could do the job, but Americans don't want these jobs. Well, that's the case. Who was doing it before those people were here? Yeah, before you bring in 10 million Folks, who was working in our plants? Who was working at Tyson's and Holly Farms, all the other Smithfield? Who was working there? Americans were working there. But see, that's the hustle. They use their media machine to put the word out that Americans don't want certain types of jobs. Here goes something you may not know. You're lied to a lot. You're lied to by your media. They're telling you that every white person has a mansion and a yacht. Now, I want you to know, because I've been around the country, not the entire country, but I've been in a few places I don't think I would have normally been to. I went to Portland, Oregon. There was a lot of homeless people in Portland, Oregon. I had no idea they had such a drug problem, a homeless problem, poor people problem. I went to Salt Lake City, Utah. Yep, I went to Salt Lake City, Utah. I had no idea how many poor-ass white people there were in Salt Lake City, Utah. It didn't look like Baltimore, but it did look like Baltimore. What I'm trying to tell you is that there are poor people all over this country. We got people that are willing to do anything for any amount of money to live indoors. Okay? So, but they are able to sell us on this BS. We're only doing this because we have to, because the Americans won't do the job. Americans are above working in factories. What? Americans are above working construction jobs. What? There are people that believe this. Mostly goofy liberals. I'm telling you, man, we're gonna get to a class war. Not a civil war, Goofy, a class war. They do the same thing with the upper echelon technology positions. They say, oh, we can't get Americans to fill these jobs because they're not qualified. They too slow. They don't take school seriously. They're like Screech and the other guy from Saved by the Bell. And they don't value education. Nah, because the education in their country is different than the education in this country. Here it costs more. It costs an arm, a leg, and half of your thigh to go to school. In America, our education system is so expensive that some of the people, I personally know people who didn't go to college, not because they couldn't have learned something, not because they weren't interested, but because they didn't want to run their parents' debt up. And in some families, they just couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford to send their kids. And then we have people that do have the credentials. We have kids, we have young people, older people, we have people with the credentials, but who do you think the employer picks? Who do you think they pick when they can pick somebody and pay them less? If you got any common sense, you already know the answer to this question. But who do you think? You think that these employers of these major corporations would rather pay more for the same credentials? So all I want people to realize is it's a hustle. Recognize you're being hustled. Recognize while we're sitting back and we're laughing and we're going, ha ha ha, look at the white people being talked down to by Vivek and by Elon Musk. They're not saying anything different. Elon and Vivek aren't saying anything different than the propaganda that's pushed out by corporate media. You know, all I'm saying is these corporations had the same attitude. They use this as an excuse to continue the system of undereducating and then overlooking. Last point. And I told one of my members I was going to bring this up. One of my members said, Tim Black, I'm a person with a couple of degrees in the technology field. They said there are positions that I've been up for that ended up not getting. Instead, they opted to hire someone with an H-1B visa. I know for a fact, Tim, that's why I was passed over. I did not get that opportunity because they would rather pay somebody less. that employ me, the black guy. People say they understand what's going on in this country. We got liberals that keep saying they understand the discrimination. They want to feed off of black people. They want to keep on feeding us and bigging us up with how America treats black people. They want to continue to run on it. We got Gavin Newsom pretending to give us shit. We got all these people. We got Kamala Harris. Everybody pretends like they care about black situations. Okay? They all pretend this. But when it comes down to it, where are they on this issue, for instance? This is where they're supposed to put some skin in the game. How much skin in the game do they really put in? None. Zero. They put some talk in the game. They manipulate. The Democratic Party should be fighting to implement programs that would train up, support our students, our people, our kids, our young people, our older people, whoever wants it to learn to be suitable for these positions. This did not happen last week. This is not a new problem. It's been going on at least since the 90s, the 80s. Where are the programs that were mitigating this? Why does this problem still exist? People got to wake up and realize anything that's able to fester for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, that ain't an accident. That's not something wrong with the system. That's the system operating as it's designed. That is an intentional dereliction, benign neglect. It's part of the game. It's part of the hustle. Ain't nothing broke. It's the way they want it to be. And the reason why you don't have Jasmine Crockett out here raising the roof on it, because it wouldn't be good for her career. The reason why you ain't got AOC raising the roof on it, because it's not good for her career. A financial position could be somewhat improved if more black students are able to get these engineering positions. And we need to, in a country that has the money, and we have money to fund Ukraine, and we got the money to send to Israel, and we got the money to fund all these other wars. We stayed in Afghanistan for a decade. We got money for all these things. Ugly ass Tesla car. Got the money for all this, the space war. Got the money for all this, right? We should have the money to put systems in place to give our kids a shot in the jobs of tomorrow. Anybody that doesn't support that, anybody who's talking about some other shit when it comes to this topic are not addressing really what's important. I'm not saying that Trump is right or wrong. I'm saying this is an opportunity for us to light a fire under Trump. Just get here. I've been waiting for your reaction. I'll catch the replay. Well, you already know what it is, Duan. Duan is great. Go see Duan B on YouTube. Subscribe to my brother Duan B, y'all. Black Americans, we need an opportunity. We need to take advantage of this. America just said we got a problem. We don't have the expertise. We don't have the workers that can fill these slots. Hello? When I was a kid, there was a show on called The Sweat Hole.
Welcome back, Cotter.
John Travolta was one of them. Freddie Boom Boom Washington. It was an annoying-ass guy. Arnold Horshack. Whenever the teacher asked a question, Mr. Carter, Horshack would be like, ooh, ooh, ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh. He was annoying as hell with this, right? Well, that's the way we got to be. When they say, how we going to fill these jobs? How we going to fill these STEM jobs? All of us. I need Bakari Sellers. I need Angela Rye. I need Roland Martin. I need all the black people, and the white people too. We'll take y'all too. Simone Sanders and Michael Steele, and Abby Phillip and Don Lemon. I need all of y'all. Since y'all in front, since the media, since y'all been picked to be the spokesmembers, Clyburn, bring your ass too. Oh, come on now. I'm with Joe. You should pardon Trump. Well, you need to pardon my friend, sir. But get your old ass over here and let's work on this issue. All of you need to be as annoying as Arnold Horshack. When they say, how we going to fill these jobs, you need to be going, ooh, 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 ooh. D.L. Hughley, instead of caping for Kamala, cape for our babies. Cape for our babies the way you cape for Kamala. Luke Campbell, the way you were annoying as fuck to every black person who didn't see Kamala Harris as Sojourner Truth. I need you to be just as dogmatic, just as a pit bull for her. I need you to be the same way about our black babies, our black young people, our black students that could learn, that should be able in this rich ass country to be given a book, to be given training, to go to academy, right? Where they're teaching them how to become the engineers of tomorrow. And maybe it exists, but I want them to put some nitroglycerin in the gas tank. I want them to turbocharge that incentive, to turbocharge those programs. That's right. Look, if we're gonna disagree on all these issues, look, the way that you were fighting for the Palestinians, Malcolm, what was it, Hill, Dr. Hill, the way you were jumping out the gym on those issues, who else? Everybody, Breonna Joy Gray, the way you and Mark Lamont here were jumping out the gym for Palestinians, I want you to jump out the gym for black young people in STEM jobs to fill these positions that Elon Musk and Trump and Vivek are talking about. The same way y'all will run it out with your hair on fire for everybody else's issues. I need you to do the same thing here. That seems reasonable.
So someone brought it to my attention, that video that I did yesterday. I said Vivek and Elania, they did not want the HB1 visas for the tech people. That's wrong. It's backwards. Laura Loomer is the one who don't want that immigration visa for the tech guys here, but the two immigrants actually do. So that makes sense. See why it's important to do your own research and pick up your own breadcrumbs. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Second, okay, listen, so there is a HBCU band that got invited to do President-elect Elania and VP Agent Orn's inauguration come January 20th, and they accepted. They're going to need your help. They got to go fund me. You don't make her, not me. That's what they want you to do. Now, I think it's Mississippi Valley Tech or University. Do your own research business. It's a synopsis, okay? Don't follow me blindly. So they got invited and they accepted it. I would like to speak to the band manager because, who goes there? Racism. That's who. So I guess you could change your name to what? Separate and Segregation Band, Apartheid Acapella Band, the Segregated Steppers. Call yourself that. The HBCU going to support him. The last time a black person went to support him at his inauguration, I think her name was Chrisette Michelle. Where is she, ho? Done there, stop Chrisette Michelle. She's gone. You know why? Because why the would you support somebody who would never support you? He don't like you. Maybe he got you there for janitorial services to clean up after the inauguration. To go and sing for him and think you will be out here and have support from us. No bueno. You understand me? And then so they got invited. I'm assuming they going. It befuddles me. Why the would you do that? Who is the band director? Guess it ain't one band, one sound. Ain't nobody speaking up. Why don't you young basic? Just hollow heads, just the brainless walking around and playing drums and just got no brain to go with it. Anyhow, that's the news for today. Okay, huh?
I just want to point this out, man. This lady was so ignorant, so belligerent. She added no context to anything she was saying. Everything that she mouthed off was nothing but opinions. She said that she made an ignorant statement that I don't want you all to miss. She said the only reason why Trump will have a bunch of black kids come to his inauguration is to clean up for him. is to be the janitorial service. This is a black woman who claimed to love black people, and she's saying the only good that you can do with your skills, put down those instruments and clean up at the inauguration, because these are the same people that said, why do we want to deport all of our illegal immigrants? Who's going to do those jobs that only they would do? They don't realize how racist they sound sometimes. We have been teaching people how to grow online. It's been absolutely amazing. We have 3 people who have been able to reach monetization in less than 30 days. Growing YouTube channels, some from 0 people. We have one guy who had 2 subscribers before he started working with me. He started helping him. His views went up 4.8 million%. We're super excited. If anybody ever want to grow on YouTube, you reach out to me with the word coach. I mean, am I tripping? Maybe I'm tripping. Let's go to the next one, man. All right, so here's this lady right here. Here's another one. Y'all, please feel free to sound off on all these videos. Let's get to it.
By now, you've probably already seen the headlines and the arguments across social media about how Mississippi Valley State University has been invited to play in the second Trump inaugural parade, and how they are raising money, asking for your hard-earned doubloons to make it happen, okay? If you're like me, an HBCU alumna ×2, and current HBCU student, then you've seen in multiple groups on Facebook and other places that folks are like, oh, this is an opportunity. I don't see what's wrong with it. Let's just support them. No, it is completely fine to say no. And I reject the framing that this is an opportunity. Sure, in any other circumstance, playing for a dignitary is an opportunity. It is an honorable thing to do. It is your honor, okay? But what happens when the dignitary does not have any honor? What happens? What happens? Exactly. So it's fine to say no. I also remember because back in 2017, I was a White House HBCU All-Star Ambassador. And that was a really interesting time. But I remember the backlash. I remember when the presidents, HBCU presidents and chancellors from 2017 were ridiculed for taking a picture at the White House. I remember Chrisette Michele being canceled for singing for Trump. I remember
she was canceled by y'all, idiots. She said, I remember an artist by the name of Chrisette Michele being canceled. Didn't the other lady also mention Chrisette Michele? Whatever happened to Chrisette Michele after she performed? She was canceled by you all, the same people that tried to cancel Candace Owens. How did that work out for you? See, when somebody bucks the black culture and we don't walk in line with groupthink, you feel like you can just say F them. They don't think like us. They don't move like us. Yet y'all claim that we're not a monolith, but you still want us to move the same, vote the same, talk the same, think the same. Are you out of your mind? Whatever happened to Chrisette Michele? She got canceled. You all did it the same way you're trying to cancel Mississippi Valley State right now. Like, y'all see that they need money to go. All of them kids, they need money to go. They need money for travel. They need money for hotels. They need money for all of that, for food, all of that stuff. But you all are saying, not our hard-earned money. You can go ahead and take your own money, because since we don't agree with Trump, we are not allowing you all, we are not participating in your dream. For anybody that ever try to hold y'all hostage like that and try to dictate what you should do in your life and not participate in supporting you or anything like that, let them walk. Trust me, God will make another way. Y'all are not the only way to get there. If, just in case you haven't noticed, these youngins have been raising money hand over fist from other people who saying, yeah, I think this will be a phenomenal opportunity. Here, take my money. I'll donate. You all claim to be the HBCU students. You're an alumni ×2. You're bragging about going to HBCU, sitting on the floor, doing your little thing. Come on, lady. Step your game up. step your life up, all right? And you're not making a whole bunch of sense. Even matter of fact, we ain't giving her no more airtime. This is Think Twice, Tiffany. You need to think thrice, goddaggit, because you sound ignorant as excuse my French. Let's go to the next one, man. I'm sorry, guys. I'm gonna try to be nice. I'm gonna try to be nice. I'm telling you, I'm gonna try to be nice. I'm gonna try to be nice. Okay, we got this lady right here.
Hey, you all were invited to Inauguration Day. So go hang out with the Orange Menace on January 20th, and you have a GoFundMe to raise money. The Mississippi Valley State University Band has been invited to perform during the presidential inauguration parade in January. The Mean Green Marching Machine from Mississippi Valley State University has been invited to Washington, D.C. for the 60th presidential inauguration parade. Help us raise $350,000 to make this historic moment a reality. They've got a GoFundMe and they've got a link for more information. Never mind there's Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's holiday weekend to commemorate his birthday. Never mind that Orange Menace Mussolini is doing everything he can to dismantle the Department of Education, to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, to dismantle Black and Brown scholarship programs, and to dismantle funding for HBCUs, which you are one of. Now, I love Black children. I love Black people. I love my HBCUs, but y'all are really going to go perform on Dr. King weekend for that Orange Menace at the 60th inauguration parade? Really? That's what we doing? Okay. As always, y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments.
Okay, I'm gonna let you know what I think in the comments. I'm in the comments right daggone now. You sound retarded. Yes, you do. We're talking about Dr. King. Yes, the inauguration is going to be there's going to be a Dr. King celebration. It's going to be a march. It's going to be a protest. It's going to be all those things. But I need for you to understand one thing. Back in the day, when Reverend Jesse Jackson used to march shoulder to shoulder with Dr. King, right? And then he came up with a bright idea. He said, you know what, guys? I think that I can run for president. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And when he decided to do it, guess what happened to everybody that was walking shoulder to shoulder with him and Dr. King and Al Sharpton and all those guys? They started pulling them down like crabs in the barrel. And this one guy named Donald J. Trump walked up to him and said, you know what? I'll support you, bro. What you need? You need some money? You need support? What do you need? I got you. And you know what? It didn't end there, but not only did he support Jesse Jackson, but he supported every single Black person that you can think of, that you praise. I'm talking about your rappers, your singers, all them want to be like them. Young Black businessmen back in the day that needed scholarships and they needed some type of funding for their business. He gave it to them. People who needed to live in his hotels rent-free until they got up on their feet. He looked out for them. This dude gave HBCUs more money than any other president that I can think of, bro. Even our first Black one, Barack Obama, or as they call him, Barry Soetoro, or whatever his name may be. So stop all this mess that they're trying to do. He's so evil, and he's so this orange guy. He's the Klansman. No, the guy that you voted for, that Kamala Harris ran on the side of, this dude spoke at a Klansman's rally. I mean, he spoke at a Klansman's funeral. I'm talking about the leader. He spoke at his funeral. You don't speak at anybody's funeral unless you're close to them, period. You're not asked to speak at somebody's funeral unless you're close to them, or you're some big person that you're hired to come through and just drop some bars real quick, like a pastor or something like that. Lady, you sound foolish as hell. I cannot believe that they are pooping on these young guys, these young people's dream, man. I will be proud and honored to help them get to the inauguration. These ladies are absolutely clueless. Oh, man, it's not only the ladies. This brother right here, next up, listen, man, this is not for me to poop on these people. I don't care about that. But I just want y'all to hear how ignorant they sound. They think that they're on their soapbox and they're saying something worth hearing, but they really aren't. They really aren't. They're trying to poo-poo on these people, on these young people's dreams, man. These are kids. Have we sat down and thought about that? These are kids with an opportunity. Y'all like, no, baby, you'll get another opportunity to do something else bigger. Yes, they will, but not the inauguration. Like, you do realize that they will only be in school for 4 years, right? There's not going to be another presidential inauguration while they are in school. This is their opportunity. They was invited. They accepted it. Now they're asking the community, the Black community, the HBCUs, we look out for y'all. It's time for y'all to look out for us. What we going to do? We need to go here. We want to go here. We have desires to be in that, to march at the 60th inauguration. Will y'all help me or not? Not only are they not helping them, but they throwing sugar honey iced tea at them while saying that they're not going to help them. We're not helping y'all. Y'all stupid. Y'all going to march in front of that racist? Where you going for? To pick up the trash? Come on, bro. This is ignorant, man. All right, now we got this young brother right here.
HBCU sweatbands. Let's talk about it. Belly has got invited to the inaugural for Donald Trump. When do we learn to stand up straight, put our chest out, and stand for what we are as people, as a society? Because it's one thing to be invited and everything was to be paid for, everything's to be luxury, and y'all was to get paid or something, but you're not. They're literally slapping your ass around and playing in your face. Playing in your face. Making you feel like, oh, this is a historic moment and this can mean so much. What is that going to really do for you in the band? Honestly, what? If y'all got to go raise $350K to be able to go, what is this going to do for the band? They literally just using y'all just to say, I had an HBCU band. I don't know. I'm not here to tell nobody what political party that they choose, but when your school and everything you're about is historically Black, and the person that's the inaugural is for, it's the Ku Klux Klan. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. Because some of y'all Black ass voted for him anyway, so hey. What's even worse, it's so many things that's happening to Black people in Mississippi that's not even spoke of or even talked about. But they want y'all to come play some horns. I don't understand. I just don't understand this type of lingo. I just had to come back. I don't understand. Please, somebody make it make sense. Let's make it make sense. Let's talk about it in the comments. I don't give a about an accolade when this ain't acting right.
Can somebody get cuz sassy as hell, man? Why don't you get your zesty ass off the goddamn on camera, man? You talking about when we gonna stick our chests out and beat men? You ain't no damn man, son. You look like one. I'm sure you got a dingling, but did you just now say they're about to go march for the KKK? Do you realize that the Democratic Party is the party of the KKK? Your punk ass don't know that, do you? You don't. And if somebody tried to give you that information and show you exactly where it says that, it says it right here, huh? You would probably want to fight them for making you look foolish or believe in the nonsense you've been believing all your daggone life. Rather than learn the truth, you will fight it tooth and nail. That's how ignorant you are. You don't get your zesty ass off my daggone screen, man. All right, gracious, zesty as hell. Oh my goodness. I mean, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that, brother. I did not mean that. I did not mean that. I kind of did mean that. I meant it. I meant it. I meant it.
From Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only there. So now Tesla's getting exposed and ripped for their abuse of the H-1B visa program. Elon Musk says the reason I'm in America, along with so many critical people who built SpaceX, Tesla, and hundreds of other companies that made America strong, is because of H-1B. take a big step back and F yourself in the face. I will go to war on this issue, the likes of which you cannot possibly comprehend. So that's the richest man in the world telling the peasants to shut up and know your place. He'll handle this.
I thought he just
Hey,
told us
Jimmy.
that we were supposed to do nice, happy
Yeah.
things on Twitter.
Right. Yeah.
Wait, I just saw I will go to war with this, the likes of which you cannot possibly comprehend. And then next day he's walking.
Of course he was. Tesla faces backlash for replacing U.S. workers with H-1B hires. No kidding? In a now controversial move, Tesla has reportedly replaced thousands of U.S. employees laid off earlier this year. Remember I said in 2023, Tesla, just Tesla, hired 720-something H-1B employees alone, just in 2023. Well, this year they've laid off thousands and then replaced them with foreign workers on H-1B visas. So again, Steve Bannon was correct about this. We were correct. The people who are pushing back against this are correct. This is all BS. This is billionaires, and this is how you do business. You do business by finding the cheapest. Why do you think everything gets outsourced to China and Bangladesh? And why do you think why do you think Boeing outsourced their engineering of their 737 MAX plane, which crashed twice, to $9 an hour engineers? Because that's how business works. They get paid because they're all run by Wall Street. And so the more money they make per quarter, that's how they're evaluated. And nothing matters about long term. They're not in it to make the company better in 5 years. They're in it to make the company better in the next 3 months. And that's all they care about. And so cutting corners, outsourcing jobs, firing, laying up, the whole thing. It's the worst side of capitalism.
Well, the airlines aren't profitable. Just those guys get profit.
Yes.
It's better to run it with no profit.
Sparking debates over labor practices and the visa program's role in Americans' job markets. This is reported by Breitbart. Tesla has reportedly replaced thousands of U.S. employees laid off earlier this year with foreign workers through the H-1B visa. Thousands. They laid them off, got rid of them. Tesla, led by Elon Musk, billionaire, richest man in the world, is under scrutiny following reports that it replaced many laid-off U.S. employees with foreign workers on H-1B visas. This revelation comes as Musk continues to champion the visa program despite backlash from critics who argue it undermines American workers. And who are those critics? Steve Bannon is the loudest critic right now, Steve Bannon. According to Electrek, citing U.S. Department of Labor data and accounts from Tesla employees, the company increased its use of H-1B visas after cutting approximately 15,000 jobs in April of 2024. The layoff, concentrated in Texas and California, affected all departments, including senior engineering roles. I wonder why those Teslas are blowing up. H-1B visas designed to allow U.S. companies to hire foreign workers for specialized occupations are often justified as filling gaps in the domestic labor market. And that's all garbage. We've showed you on this show a million ways a Sunday why that's garbage. However, critics argue the program is being misused to lower labor costs and displace American workers. You know why critics argue that? Because that's what's happening. Reports indicate Tesla filed over 2,000 H-1B visa requests during the layoff period. Wow. Accounting for more than 3% of the total visas available nationwide, just for Tesla. Proponents of the H-1B program, including Musk and entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, argue that it addresses skills shortages in specialized fields, particularly technology and engineering. There isn't a shortage. There isn't a shortage. And if there was, Vivek Ramaswamy or Elon would debate Eric Weinstein about this publicly. But they won't. They won't even acknowledge that Eric Weinstein, a super famous STEM tech guy, even offered to do it. They won't even acknowledge it. That's how afraid they are because they know they're lying. Critics maintain that companies exploit the program to prioritize cost cutting over retaining qualified American workers. You know why? Critics say that? Because that's what's happening. The controversy, and I know I'm getting flooded with DMs from people telling me that people who are from India, who are now citizens here, say they can't get hired, but their cousins from India can get hired here.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just said it yesterday, the last show. Why? We have Indians here.
Yeah.
Like India.
The Indians
it's not a
here.
racial thing. They just don't want them because they're from here.
A guy DM'd me to say, hey, as soon as when I always apply for jobs and I always get called in because I'm Indian, but as soon as they find out I'm a citizen, they're no longer interested. I'll show you that DM in a minute.
You're gonna have to do an exaggerated Indian voice to get hired now. If you
yes,
Indian to say.
So as the debate continues, over the controversy over Tesla's labor practices has intensified calls for reforming the H-1B visa program. As the debate continues, Musk's defense of the program and Tesla's reported use highlighted the broad tensions between innovation, suck it, labor rights, and immigration policy. Well, that's like a false choice. You can have innovation, you can also have labor rights, and you can also have a sane immigration policy. You can have all those things. You don't have to sacrifice.
Like a Sputnik moment, Jimmy?
Yeah,
like the goddamn commies. They figured that out.
Let's listen to this.
As someone who administered that H-1B program, it is in bad need of reform. It is a lottery system. It's not based on merit.
Now, this is Chad Wolf, former acting secretary, Department of Homeland Security. He's saying the H-1B visa program is effed up.
Pay is extremely low. And so you have this concern by many, and I share this concern, that you're actually just bringing in foreign labor at a much lower rate and replacing American workers. I don't disagree that we need to continue to attract the best and the brightest. The question is whether that H-1B program, as it's currently existing, as it's currently administered, is the right program to do that, and I don't think it is.
Wow. So there you go. Tesla getting outed. Elon Musk getting outed. Vivek Ramaswamy getting outed over this, as they should. And again, I'm not saying if I was a billionaire or the richest man in the world, I wouldn't also be messed up on this issue. I'd probably be out of touch. And so I'm not saying Elon or Vivek or Trump are evil because they're doing this. I'm saying the effects of what they're doing is evil. Just like Joe Biden. Joe Biden doesn't even know what he's doing. So when he signed the bill that let the people come in to drive trucks in the United States, the effects of that is evil. You're hollowing out the middle class in the United States on purpose. And how are you doing it? By exploiting more desperate people that you are importing. That is evil. So there you go. I think it's good. And Steve Bannon and MAGA. Now, I don't know much about Steve Bannon. I'm sure I disagree with him on lots of things, but his big thing is to bring blacks, Hispanics, whites, people of all color together around economic issues, which is exactly what the message of Fred Hampton was, Martin Luther King was, which is why they killed him. And it was also Malcolm X, which is why they killed him. It wasn't at first, but as soon as Malcolm X shifted to that message, they killed him. And that's what Steve Bannon's message is right now, which is probably why they put him in jail. Come see us on tour in Los Angeles.
Coffee. Follow me.